Yet again, I appear to be starting without Sotek. Where is he? What's going on? Clearly, our beloved Slan has decided to take a bit of a nap and has yet to arrive for our stream. So I'm just going to go live without him and hope that he turns up. And if he doesn't, we'll just do something else. I'm sure he's out there at the moment, scrabbling to get to his PC. I have sent more messages than I can shake a stick at in his direction. So while we're here, you may note there's a little scrolling message sitting at the bottom. Hopefully you can all hear me out there as I say, welcome to what is supposed to be a bonus Lorebeard stream where we take a look back at all the great joy that we have covered so far in our Warhammer lore videos. We have done quite a lot for the last couple of years, and we figured, as a way of saying thanks so much to all of you that donated so heavily during our Rate the Chaos God stream, and by the way, again, thank you so much. You made my dental work actually affordable. As a way of saying thanks, we thought we'd do a little bonus stream. As it turns out, it's just me doing a little bonus stream at the moment, but I'm sure that will very soon change. As always, we're going to be taking questions as we go, and the general theme of today is just going back over to everything that we've done previously. And if you've got any burning questions about any of the various topics we've covered before, bring them in today. Or if you think that one of our controversial takes, and we have had many, is just bullshit, then bring it up. Or alternatively, if you've got your own controversial theory to add on top of one of ours, bring that up as well. We do like a bit of controversy here at Lorebeards. So while we await Sotek, I will just quickly check if he has arrived first. He has not. So that being the case, I will dive into some of the chats that we've got on. Lorebeards on a Saturday. Yes, absolutely. We should be going for 3 hours today with Sotek. He has yet to arrive. Let's see how it goes, Brom. Intense ultimatum. Will you guys be doing a Lorebeards about the new Cathay journal? I just brought my copy after seeing Sotek's tweet about it. You know what, Intense? Probably. We've been a little bit, let's say, scant when it comes to covering Lorebeards with our... Oh, he's just coming. Excellent. With the new old world material. We've covered a bit here and a bit there, and we've discussed possibly doing it a little bit more. As we move on to the new Lorebeards channel, which some of you must be aware of out there by now, we have a new Lorebeards channel for YouTube where we're going to be streaming everything in the future. Go check that out if you haven't done so already. Type in Lorebeards. You'll find our ID over on YouTube, and it's also hopefully sitting down in the comments, but it might not be. As we move over there, we might be changing our content, and as we change that content, it's very likely we'll dive into the old world material a little bitty more. Moving down, I now have all the power, so I can just do whatever I want. I could summon the Electra Counts. I'd rather summon, however, the Electra Sotek. Hey, Brom, thanks very much for the chat, and obviously Brom is a member here at LAWhammer, so you rock. Have to make mention of a personal favourite stream with our journey through hell pit and my favourite running but surprise Carnosaur. Can't go wrong with that favourite running bit. Hey, the bloke person, good afternoon, and good afternoon as well, Mr. Bloke person. I hope you're doing well. I am. I'm asking this from my GM, okay, but does rainbow magic used by the Cabal have a name like Ulgu or Kayash? Right, so the answer to that would be, if it was an official component of Warhammer, yes. And it would probably be related to Kayash and exactly how it's presented, because it's using a similar but not the same mechanism. But as it's not an official part of Warhammer lore as it currently stands, the answer is no. Now, is there a name for it inside LAWhammer? Absolutely. So in my games, I have a name for it, because in my games, the Cabal very much use a form of magic like rainbow magic, and it does have a name. But I do believe it hasn't been confirmed yet in stream, so I won't confirm it here. Audible Andy confirmed. Brilliant. This is when Sotek joins in, and his voice is so completely different in levels to mine that we all cry. Anyway, moving down to Beer Val. You've mentioned in several previous Lorebeards that there is a pink and orange wind of magic. Could you give us some insight into what those are, and or where can we learn more about them? There isn't, but there is. So what we're discussing here is older forms of the lore and hints and snippets that the 8 colleges of magic, as we understand them, are only one part of a far greater understanding of what magic is. Now, Games Workshop has flirted with this in multiple places, whether it's just releasing a new lore of magic that's not cleanly tied to any of the 8 lores, or whether it's looking at something like, say, ice magic and then saying, well, you know what, that might not actually be one of the 8 lores either. There's lots of hints that magic isn't as simple as just 8 clean divisions, particularly given that 8 clean divisions is almost the exact opposite of what chaos means. It does, however, work really well with the 8-pointed star of chaos, so the likelihood of Games Workshop ever moving beyond it is super low, but they have at various points in the past flirted with it. For example, if we go all the way back to the Inferno magazine, in Inferno magazine, they had themselves a lovely little bit where they dived into a piece written by Marianne von Stauffer, where they dived into the lingua pistantia, which is the language of magic, and in there they discuss orch, which is orange, and indeed tied to a potential orange wind. Same for sleeve and pink. So it's been hinted at, but it is about as unofficial as you can possibly get, while simultaneously all coming from official sources. Hiya there, you made it.
I did. I'm here. I'm alive. It's true.
I'm glad to hear it. There's not many to go before we dive in. I'll give you a chance to do an intro as well. I've done one intro. Let's see if your one comes even close to my one. What new Fishman bits have you guys come across since your last stream on them as Biofoot?
None. Well, okay, actually, that's not true. That's
not true at all, actually, because there's been some interesting discussions in Discord. In fact, I'm going to name drop someone. Ashgal's been posting some art for his version of the Fishman over in the LAWhammer Discord recently. And that's been super fun because there's been some really nice ideas dropping in from that. So there you go. That's something newish. How about yourself?
And I've also been catching up on my Age of Sigmar lore. So I read the 4th edition Idneth Deepkin book, which had some new comments and stuff on the Abhalons, which are the official name for the fishmen.
The Abhalons.
Ooh, very spooky.
Okay, moving on to Sean Schultz. Is Andy sponsored by Elf Bullshit? Sadly, for all, I have written quite a bit about Elf Bullshit. I'm not really sponsored by it. For all, I would love to get more money for it. Having said that, I am currently working on a blog post for the LAWhammer Patreon blog, where I am discussing all the difference between LAWhammer elves and humans. So we're going into deep discussions about how the eye works for elves, explaining how the iris works and covers over their pupil, explaining how basically how their physiology is completely different. So I'm always doing elf bullshit, and if people like that post, I'll probably do the same thing for our halflings, because our halfling are proper weird in comparison to humans.
Man, I wish he was. I feel like that would be such a expensive sponsorship. Like that would be so much money.
Great. I'd almost certainly be a lot of hairspray.
I'm trying to remember how we get rid of this.
Oh, wait a minute, I can do that. There you go, done.
There we go.
I go blind to it. I'm object blind. One of the joys of ADHD. I didn't even see it until you mentioned it. I was like, shit, let's get rid of that. Let's also, now that you're here, get rid of, in the top corner, the unnecessary extra LOREBEARDS. There we go.
Oh, yeah,
That's more like it. There we go. Look at us.
I had doubled up.
Got it all sorted. Okay, Beer Val. Thank you very much. What is the legality status of different gods in Bretonia? Would the more unchivalrous gods like Renald, Cain, and Vilmar be banned to worship? It would require someone to write it.
Yeah, that would be the true. Cain would definitely be banned. That one's easy.
Yeah. Probably, I would say, actually, because you can't be certain, because it's not been written.
True.
And you often find that when it comes to the minor gods, you get some really weird takes when someone actually gets round to doing it. Like, for example, Cain is absolutely not banned in several parts of the old world. For all, it is definitely banned as a cult in the Empire. So you never know. There might be some sort of weird handoff from Astalia or from Tilia where Cain somehow in the southern realms of Bretonia isn't banned, and very possibly is worshipped in a different way, perhaps a little bit more close to the warlike aspect rather than the murderous aspect. You never can be certain, because writers are always going to do something that potentially surprises us. I sort of agree, though. The likelihood of Cain and Renald being happily accepted is relatively low. Having said that, though, the Ranald cult is quite prolific in Bretonnia and what little details we have of it, particularly given that a lot of the stories of Renald gaining his divinity from Shalia sort of are sourced in Bretonian myth. And the great chalice that Shalia uses to provide the divinity to Renald, so very close to the great chalices that are used by the Lady of the Lake. There's definitely some sort of conflation there, and possibly a borrowing of one legend and mixing it in with the other. And there's more than one suggestion that Renald, when mortal, assuming you even believe he was ever immortal, it looks most likely that he never was, he was always a god, but when he was mortal, might have been a Bretonian. Other stories say he was an Estalian. Very rarely do they say that he's anything other than Estalian or Bretonian, but hey, you never can be certain.
Yeah, I would very much, if I was would be guessing, which I am, I would say Kane almost certainly banned. Renald, I could see Renald very much being like officially banned, but is very heavily embraced by a lot of the peasantry. And like if you're dealing with like Haramalts and stuff, is probably seen very, very positively by those that have the whole, Bertrand the Brigand, which we'll talk about not tomorrow, but the week after. If you were to do a full update, like a full update for Bertrand, would almost assuredly be a very Renaldan character.
I agree. And if you were writing it with all of the old world material in mind, you would definitely include Renald as a core component of that writing. However, you tend to find that Games Workshop treats each one of its primary groupings, its factions, as almost monolithic stories that ignore the rest of what goes on around it. So, for example, Bertrand le Brigand, when he's updated, almost certainly will just be Lady, Lady, Lady. Why? Because that's their Bretonian god, in the same way that whenever they add something new to the Empire, they tend to just go Sigmar, Sigmar, Sigmar. Whilst the old world is far deeper than that and almost certainly would have better reflections of the other gods in the material. So I think, Renald is an obvious route to go down for that one.
Yep. And then Valmar, I can actually see him being full on legal in Bretonnia. Valmar is kind of just a god of like revelry in a lot of ways, and Bretonnia is, in some funny ways, despite their chivalrous nature, they tend to be a bit looser than Sigmarites are often portrayed. And it would be fun to see that being legal in Bretonnia versus the Empire, which one might not expect.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Mornington Crescent recently discussed playing one storyline in another setting. Are there any Warhammer storylines you'd love to see run in another setting, or vice versa? Hey, I've done this a lot. So Mornington Crescent, just to very quickly make this as clear as I possibly can, any story, if it is good, at its fundamental levels, can be ported into almost any setting. But some stories work very well for other settings. For example, when they've got very similar themes, those themes might be dark cultists or twisty-turny plot lines or some equivalent. So you tend to find that Call of Cthulhu works very well with Warhammer, and Warhammer in turn works very well with Call of Cthulhu. And there's a reason for that. If we look at Shadows over Bugenhafen, which was written by Graham Davis way back in the day, his commissioning point from Brian Ansell was create a Call of Cthulhu adventure for our Warhammer game, basically. And that's why it's Shadow over Bugenhafen, in the same way Shadow over Innsbruck was the old Call of Cthulhu story. And he took the idea of secret cults going to this cosmic evil at the end, the cosmic evil at the end being Tzeentch, and used that as the core of his story plotting there. And that meant that almost from that point onwards, those sort of cosmic evil style chaos plots became kind of common, meaning that you can easily port entire storylines from Call of Cthulhu into Warhammer. And I've done this multiple times. I've played versions of Loremaster of Sotek. I played a version of Murder on the Orient Express. It's not called Murder on the Orient Express. That's the Agatha Christie story.
But I played, what? I would love to read the Warhammer version of that. Where's that?
And then, of course, I had Death on the Nile. I mean, Death on the Reich. Because obviously Warhammer steals from everywhere, Death on the Nile and Death on the Reich being the obvious conflations there. So cut a long story short, I do this a lot. Whenever I read a story in another setting, one of my first thoughts is, would this work in another story better? Could I use this elsewhere? And you tend to find that most of the Warhammer and 40k stories are almost ports over for each other. So if you've got them out there and you see a 40k book and you're thinking, can I use that on Warhammer? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah. I was recently watching a literary analysis on Over the Garden Wall, which if you've never watched, you should. It's a fantastic cartoon that has a lot of like, it's very short too. It's only like 2 hours, the entire story. Beautiful, beautiful series. And one of the things that was a discussion is about how adaptation can be done, because a lot of people, when they're like newer writers, are like super obsessed with, oh, I have to tell a completely original story, otherwise I'm a hack. But if you try to do that, you're like probably gonna have a bad time. And it's more of how you tell a story as opposed to what exactly the story it is you're telling. So with that in mind, if there was a story from Warhammer that I think would be interesting to see in another setting, I think for me personally, I find a lot of the aspects of the Warhammer Lizardmen to be really, really intriguing, of the idea of like a precursor or ancient race that has this obsession with trying to basically run maintenance on a system that they were around for the building of, but they don't really understand how any of it works anymore. And they're also very, very weird, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they have a very bizarre moral compass. So like they're good guys, but they're not nice people, so to speak. I find that super interesting. I love ancient guardian races. And I wish more settings would play around with them in really fun ways and allow them to be weird instead of just being like robots or like really simple creatures. I like how complex a lot of the Lizardman stuff is. And like they're obviously wrong and ritualistic about a lot of things, but in really exciting ways.
Yeah, that sounds good. Right, before we dive into any more of the super chats, would you like to give your version of the intro? Let's see how close it matches mine.
Yeah, so my version of the intro for today is actually quite simple. Of that, this show, Lorebeards, has been a super duper fun thing for me and Andy for the last 2 years, which is wild that it's already been 2 years. And as we have worked our way across it, we have received an incredible amount of support from y'all, to put it very, very bluntly, like a staggering amount of support for which we are eternally grateful. And so one of the things was that, especially when Andy was going through the dental escapades, there was
still going through them, by the way. I've got another appointment in 2 weeks.
Poor sweet Andy.
Yeah.
But y'all really showed up and forced to help, and we wanted to kind of pay that back in a way that we could. And one of the things that I often see when I'm looking online at the places where people discuss Lorebeards, whether that's like on Twitter or some subreddits or over on the Discord, is that makes me genuinely laugh in like a good way, is that people will sometimes see some of our takes and they'll sometimes the response will be, wow, that's really cool, that's really interesting. And other times people will go, what the fuck is wrong with these two? What are they smoking? Dragons are enslaved? How dare you?
Abarash is not heterosexual, just what? He's a vampire. Fucking hell. He's a vampire.
So whenever I see those, there's a part of me that's like, oh god, I wish I could like just have that person step into the room and chat with us and be able to like air their grievances and us be like, we're not telling you this is just the way it is, but we can support our argument and see how you feel about it at the end of that. And doing just a fun little bonus stream of being able to just open the floor to that was sort of the idea for today. And
indeed, so this is very much bonus led by you. This is just, we're kind of chilling. We're going to see where you lead us more than anything else, because it's your bonus stream. And you can very much take us wherever you want to. As I said right at the beginning, though, controversy. Let's discuss controversy. Because that always makes us happy. Have you caught up where we were in the super chats? Or would you like me to grab one next?
I will try. I will see. That would have been the next one from my perspective.
Okay, let me
we've already done that one. So once we're full caught up, I would be happy to. But I feel like it's
okay. So it's Mihaus Salomon. Vampire souls are bound to their bodies. Wouldn't cutting this bond with Obsidian, OP Dispel, or Gotrek's Rune Axe free souls like it did Ulrika in AOS.
Okay, so my one issue with this proposal is that this would imply that vampires are a jar that if you cut it in the right way, the soul leaks out into the space around it, which is not. So think about what you said, right? That it's bound to their body. That's a period. that's an end. You've reached the end. There is no comma. There's no but. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
It's not a spell that can be unwoven. It is, to me, that would be kind of like saying, if I take like the most powerful like pick in the world and I hit a rock, can I like separate the base elements back into like their original components, or like separate them by hitting it hard enough? And it's like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, it's not how it works at all. Basically, imagine your vampire is a cake. I know that sounds daft, but run with me here. So you've gone and got yourself some ingredients. You've got yourself some eggs. You've got yourself some flour, and you've got yourself some whatever it is you're making your cake out of. And you've bound them all together, and you've got yourself a really lovely cake mixture. Then you've slapped it in the oven, and you've made yourself a cake. Then someone comes along and goes, I have got the spatula of doom. I'm going to get eggs out of this cake. No, you're not. The spatula of doom is not going to separate all those egg bits that are throughout this entire cake. Not only that, because vampires are not really cakes. Vampires are an eternally regenerating bugger who almost is impossible to kill. So even if you cut their arms off, or even their heads sometimes, they kind of come back stronger the next day, because vampires suck. Quite literally, as well as metaphorically. So our sucky vampires, when you cut off bits of them, they just regrow. So not only can you not separate the egg from your vampire cake, but even if you try to cut bits off of it, they just sort of grow back. Being an anti-magical thing does not in any way stop that. So sorry, Michał, assuming that I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm probably not. That's not going to, I think, in this case, work.
Yeah. Ashgal's work in the Discord is dope as hell. Just one humble fish slut's opinion. Thank you for being our resident fish slut. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate it.
Acne Zebra, to what extent are non-humans in the Empire subject to military/magical conscription? Is an urban Dawi getting drafted? Elves called for battle magic?
Right, so the answer to that is no. They're not, unless they're citizens of the Empire specifically. Now, Dawi can't do magic, so there is nothing in there. But military, they absolutely are citizens. And if there's a conscription going on and they're citizens of the Empire, yes, you're going to get them. Imperial Dwarves used to be a core unit of the Empire. In 4th edition, you had Imperial Dwarves. In 3rd edition, you had Imperial Dwarves. But you tend to find that with the later editions, because they're so concerned about the individual thematics of each army, that they get rid of anything that doesn't look like core that army. So they get rid of things like ogres from the Empire army. It used to be a core component of it. Halflings even are sometimes dipped because they're not the core human that you expect. Because all too often Games Workshop say, it's the Empire of Man, which is definitely a take. But not necessarily true for what the Empire presented.
Yeah, the nice thing about the old world is that they have brought back Imperial Dwarves and Imperial Ogres as like part of your army build. Like you can just
which is great.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly as it should be. Now, when it comes to elves, it's all slightly differently because elves have got themselves a deal, effectively, with the Colleges of Magic because they founded it, which meant that they created its original charter. And part of that original charter is all elves are presumed to have been registered with the Colleges of Magic so they can do magic legally in the Empire under certain circumstances, and they are entirely outside of the state army system. They are not part of the college system. They're effectively foreign visitors who have registered and are allowed to do magic because of, thanks, historical reasons. So elves are not getting drafted. No elf in their right mind ever really calls themselves a citizen of the Empire. That's not really how they work. There are certainly some humans who will say that the elves born within what they consider to be the Empire's borders as citizens of the Empire, but legally speaking, their magic users cannot be called upon. So the big answer to that one is sort of yes and no.
Knivel or Knivel, one of those two.
Knievel. Evil Knievel.
Evil Knievel. How did Is that supposed to be Renaud? Yeah, that's supposed to be Renaud. How did Renaud get on the official Empire Pantheon when he's the god of anti-authority and crime? There seems better options for Magnus.
Magnus is very astute, and he doesn't care what the cult of Renaud in its significance says. He just recognizes its significance. The 10 cults that he pulled together for his grand conclave were chosen because of their significance to the empire as a whole, regardless of what those cults thought. And he went to several of those cults and also said, your cult is so important to the fabric of the empire that you should also have an electoral vote. Most refused this, which may sound very surprising to most people out there who immediately go, but surely everyone wants power. No, many of the cults just have no interest in power at all. And that includes the cult of Renaud. And indeed, when they send people to sit upon the Grand Conclave, whenever it's summoned to speak to the Emperor every 7 years, you often find that they're not high-ranking cultists, or 4 or 5 of them might turn up, because they are indeed anti-authority in general. Sometimes no one turns up, but often somebody does. But the importance was to recognize Renaud, because in many respects, he would end up becoming somewhat like the Wicked Witch of the story, where if no one had invited him, he would turn up regardless. And he might not be happy that he hadn't been invited. Magnus was much more, let's say, astute than that. He pulled together what he considered to be the most important cults. And, for example, the cult of Tal was offered a vote for the emperor, and they turned it down. They said they didn't want to be a part of the electoral system. But why did he choose them? Because Renaud's cult's really important to the peasantry. It's a super important cult, and sometimes it has something that it needs to say that's important. And if there wasn't a vehicle for them to be able to express what that important message was to the emperor, then there's a problem. So Magnus built a process into place, allowing the cult of Renaud to approach the emperor ever so often.
Yeah, I would very much say this is an example of just showing how competent Magnus and his advisors were at the time. Of that, like, having someone like the Renaudans on the council to have a voice is a very good barometer or just in case against certain kinds of threats, which is good to have. All right, I think I'm caught up now.
Excellent. And it is Mads next. Perfect.
Yeah. Mads, how are students divided into the Winds of Magic? So I assume we mean the colleges of magic as opposed to winds, because the winds themselves don't actually necessarily care at all. But the Empire colleges do.
Yeah. So this one's, again, super easy. Contrary to what you might expect, given what most of the books say, you can't use all the Winds of Magic as a spellcaster. You just can't. Most humans are only capable of using 1 or 2, maybe even fewer. So you might shuffle them off to the Light College because that happens to be where they were discovered, but they're useless at it, even though they have the spark of magic. So they get shunted off to another college, the college that shows and hopefully reflects what they're showing as power already. You tend to find that most would-be wizards are already doing something. A classic would be they go to sleep, they wake up, and they've burnt out their bed. Off to the fire college you go, bright wizard you're going to be. Others perhaps get lots of strange visions and weird things. They look up into the night sky, off to the celestial college, but they sometimes get it wrong. And as they go to the colleges, sometimes their new apprentices just aren't very good, or they start showing capability and skill in other winds. And when they do that, the wizard at hand has got a choice. Do they send them to the other college? Or if they're competent in the wind they're teaching them, do they just go, nah, fuck it, we'll just keep on teaching you this one? Legally, in the Empire, you can only ever study one wind, if you are a human, obviously. That's it. And once you've done that, you become attuned to that wind and will never be able to do another wind if you go with official Imperial doctrine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is the fun tragedy that we don't get explored that much from like the battle game ever, but is a good one to explore from the roleplay game, is the idea that someone is in the wrong college, of that they're in a college that they wouldn't be if you were giving them the lore they're the most attuned to, but either it hasn't been discovered yet or there's politics at play.
Yeah. I mean, if you could imagine it, okay, let's give you a model so that you can sort of understand how it could work. This isn't how it works, but this is a way of understanding how it could work. Imagine you're 8 colleges and you're a would-be wizard. You've got the spark of magic inside you. Now, roll 1d10 for each one of the 8 winds. The number you roll is how powerful you are at that wind. And you need to roll at least a 5 for it to be powerful enough that you could become a wizard in it. And you roll all those dice, and perhaps you roll Bright College 10, and you roll Celestial 5, and you happen to be found by a Celestial Wizard. The Celestial Wizard tests you out, checks what you can do, and goes, hey, this guy could learn the Celestial magic. Excellent. The blue wind for you, my son. So off you go into the Celestial College, and you are okay at it. You're fine. But you aren't excellent, but you will pass as a mid-tier magister, not a very good one, assuming that you carry on with your lessons. But if you'd gone to the Bright College, you might have been a prodigy. But the Empire doesn't have a consistent way of testing the strengths and weaknesses for each of their apprentices for each of the winds. They just don't have that. It's not one of the tools that they have inside their arsenal, meaning that it's a little bit luck-based. And if you go to the wrong place, well, kind of tough. Because once you're attuned to a wind, that's it. You're done.
Antonio,
I'm going to add one extra fact here. Because there is something that's worth noting. Because, hey, it's a sidey stream. And we can go into the slightly finicky details.
Sure.
Legally, you're not allowed to cast more than one wind. Legally. And the way they frame that is, once you graduate from a college, you can never cast from one of the other winds. There are characters in game who have failed to graduate from more than one college. Zavant Conager is one of them. He is a character in a couple of books written by Gordon Rennie, as I recall. And basically, he went to multiple colleges, did the apprenticeship, then bunked out. Meaning that he has a vast array of very simple spells at apprentice level from a bunch of colleges. And he is channeling multiple winds legally. There are ways around almost every law. Zavant Conager is a genius and also somewhat of a Sherlock Holmes-alike type character. And Zavant Conager has found a method of getting effectively magic from multiple colleges. There are always ways. And he never graduated, meaning that he can actually legally channel more than one wind. There is always ways around. But you've got to dance a bit and also dodge the witch hunters who often don't care too much about the technicality of a law. They're far more interested in, are you burning or not?
Yeah. So Antonio, I'm going to, I'll try. Looks like Spanish, might be Spanish. So, hey, finito de lavorare e ora sono con voi. I don't know what that means. It's been forever.
I don't know. Anyone speak the appropriate language and drop into the comments, please. Antonio, I apologize for being so very deeply English in terms of how I approach language.
And I bet I butchered that. Necromancer Cobalt, well, I'll keep an eye out for what the translation was.
Yeah, me too. I'm watching right now.
Super chat, but I have no idea. Necromancer Cobalt, in terms of how well they embody their god's will / desires, how would y'all rank Sigvald among the great mono god mortal champions of chaos? He's one of my favorite Warhammer characters. Okay, so I have an opinion on this. That was Italian? Really? Oh, apparently
I figured it was Italian. I didn't want to say because I thought you might have known something I didn't.
Then I definitely butchered it. But still don't know what it means, though. Necromancer Cobalt. So what I will say here is I think Sigvald is one of the absolute best Slaanesh characters in like representing what a Slaanesh character should be. I think the Sigvald novel in particular is fantastic. And does a amazing job of giving insight into the character and building him, fleshing him out in a lot of really, really great ways that supports his other lore. It's like one of the good examples of like, this is what a Black Library book on a special character should be. However, as far as embodying the god's wills / desires, Sigvald definitely does. He is quite literally the spoiled brat of Slaanesh. And that's why Slaanesh loves him so much, is that he's just an incredibly spoiled brat. And he has a very, very bratty personality of that. He just gives in to all of his whims, and he has no what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word, and I'm struggling to remember what it is.
I'm not sure what you're looking for.
He doesn't resist any of his impulses. I'll put it that way. And just goes with it. And Slaanesh rewards that infinitely. Now, I have a particular brain bug, which is not a thing in the setting. I want to say that beforehand. This is not a canonical thing, but it's something that I am personally obsessive about, which is that I like the idea of trying to have that there is a character that represents the ultimate, that is like the ultimate representation of each of Slaanesh's 6 rings, each of the 6, like the big focuses of Slaanesh.
Screw depression.
Screw depression. But because Slaanesh has these 6 rings, and each of the rings is based on one of the 6 like desires or temptations, or however you want to word it, of Slaanesh. That makes it more and more difficult before you get to the palace. And I have always been a hardcore fan of the 7 deadly sins trope, and I like to adapt Slaanesh to that, but it would be like 6 deadly sins, which doesn't sound as cool, so I would probably want to like word it differently. But the idea that Sigvald represents very much like the concept of vainglory, to me is like he's peak vainglory. I love Sigvald. He's great. He's a fun character.
So I have a slightly different angle, which is nothing mortal can ever be anything like an etheric entity, ever. But that something mortal can be very much in a single channel. So it can express a singularity of emotion or singularity of purpose, meaning that they might be, as far as the far more cosmically aligned entity is concerned, a perfect example of what they like. But that doesn't mean they're anything like the god at all, in any way, shape, or form, in the slightest. Further, there is more than one example, multiple examples, where the Chaos Gods actually don't care about anything. And it's all very much individual belief as to how much the Chaos Gods do or don't like an individual thing. So while Slaanesh 100% loves this, simultaneously, Slaanesh might not care at all, in the slightest. It's just a tiny little mortal doing tiny little mortal things, and it just doesn't care. In the same way that to say, you know, if he'd been a perfect Slaaneshi person, surely he would have ascended. No, Slaanesh, like all the Chaos Gods, is a god based on whim, and just because you might one day be perfect, the next day you might not, as far as it's concerned. When you're doing exactly the same thing, there is no form of perfection when it comes to the Chaos Gods. Nothing is ever good enough, because nothing can ever match up to the impossibility of an etheric entity. But singularity and purity of emotion is something that always attracts. So to answer this one directly, I would say he's literally nothing like Slaanesh, while simultaneously he's perfect in almost every way.
I will say the 2 little fun facts about Sigvald. My favorite thing about him ever will be that the Sigvald novel does this hilarious buildup of when he quote unquote meets Slaanesh, or meets what he believes to be Slaanesh, or like a little fragment of his god. There's this note where it basically says that Slaanesh will appear to whoever approaches them as their greatest desire. And so what Sigvald sees is himself, which is the funniest thing they could have possibly written. And it's so perfect. And then on top of that, the other thing is that, to go along with what Andy said, as such a great showing of that, Age of Sigmar does such a good job with Sigvald's story, where it's revealed that the moment Sigvald is killed after his fight with Krell, he defeats one of the greatest still around champions of Khorne, who's a horrible threat to the Dark Gods, and advances the schemes of the Dark Gods. Surely he would have been rewarded. Nope, he basically was removed from Slaanesh's field of vision. Slaanesh just forgot about him immediately, which is great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just remember that the Chaos Gods are not entities that you can easily fathom, imagine, or indeed scrute. And I'm indeed using the word scrute as the opposite of being inscrutable. You cannot scrute these Chaos Gods. They are inscrutable. You can't really tell what they do or don't think. It is all supposition. They're etheric entities who don't, strictly speaking, think at all in the way that we understand it. So I'd say the more that you think of them as something you can't understand, the closer you're going to get to an answer for something like this.
Thank you for the translation. I have just finished with work, and I'm with you guys now.
Yay! Thanks very much for the translation. Appreciated.
Darius, thank you much for the membership. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Darius. Appreciated.
Another green name. Let's see. We were right. Boom. Cole Patterson, you mentioned someone made art of the god we made on stream. I can't find it. Would now be a good time. I will get it while Andy's yapping about something at some point because I know where it is.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. I'll bring up the next comment because I don't know where we are, and I'll answer that while you're doing the thing. Stephen Lucas. Oh, thank you very much. Very appreciated. You and the corn are hypocritical. Yeah, the corn. I mean, I'm hypocritical. I don't know about anyone else.
A video
helps me appreciate him. He doesn't want you to think just a weapon, and sorcery, even sorcery priests, is an alternative to direct prayer he can't abide. Yeah, fair enough, Stephen Lucas. I think that's a fair comment. Anything you'd like to add to that?
So first of all, thank you for the comment. I'm glad you've enjoyed the corn videos. They've been fun. If I'm understanding that question correctly, comment correctly, I should say. And the thing that I would say is one of the things that I get this from, I see this with 40K players a lot, and they get mad when I say this, but I'm going to say it again, of that 40K, I think, has done an unfortunate thing, which is fine. It's not the end of the world, and it's just interpretation, so I don't really have any issues with it, of really trying to convince people that Khorne is this honorable god of battle that should be has a respectable quality. When he's not, and he never has been. Like, he's literally just the god of tantrums. It's what he is.
The big man baby of gods.
Yeah, if you look at him in the perspective of a child that is like sitting in a high chair and it's getting angry and it's throwing things at people because it has a tantrum that never ends, which if you've ever been around a child that's having a tantrum would be horrible to be around. Especially if it had godly power, that's what.
And you can't reason with it because it's a child. It's pre-reasoned, so there is no reasoning with Khorne.
Yeah. Now there are honorable Khornates. I don't think there's many of them, but they're out there. But the god himself, I don't think there's any way, shape, or form that describes him accurately.
Yeah, all of the chaos gods are wrong and broken and terrible and twisted and the worst. All of them. None of them are acceptable. Anyone who goes, Papa Nurgle, he'd be all right. No. Slaanesh, I could go with that. No, seriously. Bad. All of them are terrible. And I think the more that we focus on that, the happier I'm going to be. Biofoot. Okay. So vampires are cakes. Yes, absolutely. Fishmen are everywhere, completely. So why do you turn your nose up at Gelt? Because he sucks. And Skrulk, finding weeded bliss in each other's arms. Gelt and Skrulk finding weeded bliss.
Weeded bliss?
It's better than wedded. I'm really loving the image of the pair of them getting high. I'm loving each other because of it.
See, that's where your brain went. My brain went, and they're both like dressed in like gardening clothes, out working in the yard together, enjoying their lawn.
I'm just imagining them with very happy smiles and very big spliffs. Hey, Garrett, very important question. Can magic be used to make food more delicious and more filling? Two different questions there. And would you personally dare to eat magically enhanced food? So let's go through each of them. Can magic, now magic is a very loose definition here because each of the winds of magic have got their own strengths and weaknesses and do different things. And I'll get to that in a moment as we discuss it. Make food more delicious. Delicious is very much a process of the mind. It takes the signals that come from your taste buds and it basically says this is good, this is bad. So can you make something that's not delicious delicious? Yes, grey magic, for example, can make you believe that something's super tasty in the same way that it can make you believe that something sits in front of you or make you believe that you've heard a sound because it's effectively a wind of fakery and illusion. So yeah, you could use the grey wind to make something taste more delicious. You could also take, for example, the jade wind, and you could add additional life to food that is perhaps not as plump as it could be and bring out the natural flavors. Each one of the winds will do something different. More filling though. Now, this is something that gets a little bit different. There's more than one example, for example, with the grey wind, where it makes you think that the meal that you've just had is filling, and it isn't. And you just starve and waste away. So is it more filling? No, but do you feel it's more filling? Yes. There is also the concept of, say, a Gyron well or basically a pool of magic sitting in your belly that sustains you. You can add extra Gyron to things, that's the jade wind of magic, that effectively sustains you. Elves are capable of doing this almost naturally as they move towards their later years. They'll often just have a long nap for a couple of years. and their bodies are sustained by the magic that wells within them, particularly Gyron. So more filling? Yeah, you absolutely can, but not with all the winds of magic. Magic is a bad term to use here. You'd be better to say, can some of the winds do some of these things? Yes. Can all of them? No, absolutely not. And would I personally dare to eat magically enhanced food? Depends on how it would be magically enhanced.
Yeah, and because, to put it very bluntly, if you ask the question, can magic, whatever comes afterwards, the answer is yes. But it would just be a matter of figuring out how and like which winds to use. And would I dare? I probably wouldn't, because I feel like it would be a 7 out of 8 odds that it would be bad and a 1 out of 8 odds that it would be good. And I just don't like those odds very much.
I mean, that's entirely fair. I mean, it probably wouldn't go down very well.
Yeah.
So did you find the link?
No, unless it was like I had a really good relationship with an elven host and I was like an Ethel Lauren or Earth One or something, and they were like, we're going to bring you the best meal ever. I would eat the shit out of that. Like, I'd be all in on that meal. And that would be a very magically enhanced meal, because the description of Wood Elf feasts sound amazing. Actually, I just want to grab this real quick. If you're watching on the LOREBEARDS channel, the LOREBEARDS YouTube channel, super chats and stuff are not turned on yet, because we're still going through the process of getting approved for that. They will be on very soon. But if you're like, I really want to do a super chat, where the hell is it? You have to go over to the LAWhammer YouTube channel for right now.
For today, but yeah, that won't be for long. We're about to be changing that, but we haven't changed it yet.
Yeah, just wanted to grab that out real quick. And also, I found it. So this is the art by Ashgal, good old, wonderful, beloved Ashgal, who made their interpretation of the Wind God that we created on the Making a Warhammer God stream. And it's super fucking cool.
This is where you go, holy fuck sticks! And that is the correct response.
Yeah, I do love, for anyone that can't tell, it's got the hooves for the back feet, and it's also just that little guy, just that tiny little guy down there.
That's the best bit.
It's great. All right. Biofoot. Nope, we already did that one.
Wrong one. Next one's Beerval.
Beer.
Next one should be Beerval.
Ah, here we go.
There we go. Got it. Excellent.
Would Norse dwarfs do Viking raids? Would they do them against Kislev or the Empire, or only against evil factions? So I think this is actually a really good question. Because to put it bluntly, the answer should be yes. But I would bet Games Workshop would be deeply uncomfortable with the answer being yes.
Yeah, I mean, to go Viking. So are they going to be Viking around? And the answer is yes. Now, in a modern fashion, we'd be Viking, but no, they are Viking. And indeed, it once was a verb to go a Viking. And would they be doing that? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, they would. Now, would they do that with the modern interpretation, such as it is? Maybe not. But the very concept of Viking is very much laced into, in the Warhammer version, the Norse dwarfs, more probably than the Norse themselves, because they originate most of the culture that the Norse pick up later. So the answer to this was almost certainly yes. And what we consider to be evil factions and what they consider to be evil factions are possibly two very different things.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting, in my opinion, so the Norse dwarfs, according to what lore we have, should have been fairly disconnected and weren't talking to the Karazhan Corps when the whole thing with Sigmar goes down. So there could have very well been a period of time where the people of Nordland and Oslo, like all of these coastal areas, were being raided by dwarfs, which would have been really interesting. That would have been a really unique relationship of the dwarfs like coming to take resources and take it back. Because like dwarfs, if the dwarves of the Karazhan Corps are getting most of their food and stuff through easy trade, it would have been interesting for early Norscan dwarves to have relied more on a raiding system that maybe later evolved into trade. But that it would have just been really unique storytelling of there being communities, especially in like the northern parts of the empire, where maybe Sigmar is a little less popular and like Ulrich or other forms are a little more popular. And a part of that could be that the Sigmarites say, you must always be friendly to dwarfs. And the people in the north go, fuck that. We have histories of dwarfs raiding us. They're assholes. And that would
I think that'd be
really
great.
Cool.
Yeah, agreed.
This is definitely out of order, but I think we're here now. Akiyoshi, you've covered Old World before, the latest Arcane Journals. Thoughts on Miao Ying's expansion into the Old World, Cetra invading the Border Princes. So I will say, the moving narrative of the Old World is, frankly, I don't care what anyone else says, very exciting. It's super
One of the best
exciting.
bits of it.
I just picked this up because it was impossible to get until very recently, even though it's been out for like 4 weeks. But I finally got it. I read through it. I was so happy with this book. I wasn't really sure what I was expecting. I was so happy with this book. The amount of world building they did for the Darklands genuinely knocked my socks off. Where they're like, oh yeah, no, the Southern Darklands, full of people. There are settlements. It's not just pig barter.
Mirrors what we've been saying in a previous stream as well. So
yeah, makes us look great.
Yeah, it makes us look brilliant.
Like they expanded on, oh yeah, you know all those old trade routes from the Dogs of War book? They're all still canon. Yep. Also, here's us cleaning up which trade routes go where. Now, the one thing I criticize about the book is I think they're a little overly cutesy, that they don't need to be, with pretending that the non-active factions don't exist. So like they don't want to talk about the Chaos Dwarves. They don't want to talk about the Ogre Kingdoms. They just say like there are myriad threats from this direction. And you're like, okay, so we're talking about the Chaos Dwarves. They're like, we didn't say that though. So that part's a little silly. But the world building that these campaign books are doing is fantastic. The new art we're getting, fantastic. I mean, just off the top of my head, there's a piece in here that like the art of Miao Ying fighting a chaos dragon. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. That's so cool. So I'm super happy. We'll be doing a catch-up stream pretty soon. I think we're gonna wait for the War of Cetra Sphere to come out. Which, oh my god, it's actually out like literally right now. The pre-order is. I'm gonna go look at that real quick and hope that it's not sold out. Oh no. Oh no, he says. Please don't be sold out.
Literally doing it while we're on stream. I love that.
Wait. Oh no, it's not this week. Oh wait, no. This is the 40K. I don't give a shit about 40K stuff.
So while you're doing that, Jonathan Scott, thank you very much. When will we get the long-awaited Old World cooking stream? I need to know how to cook corned beef and hashut and mork, or possibly gork and beans. Corned beef and hashut.
Those are words.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's going to happen. Thanks for that one, Jonathan. Grim Isaac B. I feel like you made a mistake in the Greenskin what if, as I feel like Bretonnia and the North Sea Empire would ally, and Northeast, I presume Northeast, would have similar relationship with the Norse Dwarf, helping them take the Norse mountains.
I mean, that is certainly quite possible. If I recall, the version of the story that we had built mainly ended up being that Sigmar ultimately still happened and fought the Greenskin threat, which means that he had pushed out the Brittany and the North Sea. So they were already kind of shunted off to different parts of the world, and there were unpleasant relations there.
Didn't we get ourselves a Morcar Empire up there? Okay, with leading the Norse. Isn't that one?
No. No. No.
You sure? Sure? Morcar the Uniter instead of Sigmar, isn't it that one? We've had quite a few what ifs, so making sure we get the right one can be more difficult than you first think. You might have watched it just last week. We streamed it some time ago.
That might have been the Anarian one.
I don't think that was an Aryan. I don't think so anyway. Or maybe it was.
I don't fucking remember.
Is anybody who watched it recently in the comments, can you confirm for us, please? That'd be super appreciated.
Yeah, so Grim Isaac, what I'll say is, ultimately, it was a what if. So anything could have happened. So yeah, you are correct, is what I'll simply say. But like anything could have happened. That's the joy of them. Oh no, that wasn't the one with the Morcar. Okay, cool, great. Then yeah.
There you go. Hey, I might be old, but my memory's not that short yet. I'll just say one more time. I'm 50 this year. What the hell? How did that happen? Okay, right, I've said it now.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
God damn it.
50. No, we already did that. We already did beer. Have we done this one? Was it? Oh, Oh no, here, let me do this one first. Haha. Beerval, you've mentioned that you were making 8 witch lores for
Yes, I was.
Wolf before as a counterpart to the 8 color lores. Could you briefly say what they would be, or rather how you would go about?
I have forgotten most of them already. I'm pretty sure it was, oh god. No. I'd have to go check my notes because this was a while ago. Because there wasn't just going to be 8. Each one of the color lores were going to have their alternatives. So the illusionism was going to be there for the grey wind.
Oh yeah,
the light wind would have had demonology attached to it. The purple wind would have had necromancy attached to it. So each one of the winds would have had something. Shamanism would have been for the amber wind. The jade wind would have been one of the elementalist ones, as I recall. Elementalist was going to be a bit broader than that alone, because obviously you got fire for your pyromancy. That's also elementalism. But elementalism was going to be sort of a catch-all for a few of them. It was going to be a bit less clean than what it is to say, oh, there's going to be 8 and 8. Well, sort of, because several of the non-8 winds of magic types of magic are drawing from multiple winds, so it's a messy situation, particularly when you look at, say, elementalism, which is drawing for about 4 or 5 winds, and they don't recognize that they're drawing from any wind at all. So yeah, it's complicated. I need to check my notes, Beerval, though, so I can't remember all of them off the top of my head.
Beerval, wasn't an episode, so feel free to ignore. Nonsense, we can answer it. But how is Manon, Stromfell's cult rivalry handled outside of the Empire? Sartosa has the biggest Stromfell's temple, but also someone rumored to be Manon's daughter. How would pirate settlements like that have Manon and Stromfells coexist?
Because no one's really thought about it. That's how.
Okay, so yeah, that would be the actual canon answer, is that no one's dealt with it. If you wanted
I shouted at a writer for doing this. I didn't shout because I never shout at anyone, but I basically said you can't do that because you're conflating the cult of Manan with the cult of Stromfells. And a writer went, there's a difference. And that was literally the reply I got, to which I went, yes, here's your sources. And then I got a reply about 4 days later going, I'm so sorry. I thought Manan and Stromfells were the same thing. So that's what happens. Yeah.
And to be fair to that author,
they sometimes are.
Yeah, there's the whole thing with Stromfells where it's like some people believe that Stromfells is just like Manon in a particularly bad mood. But if you
Manon in a shark suit.
Yeah, if you wanted to play around with it though, so what I will say is that when you're dealing with like Salt Spite, right? You could have it where Arnessa Salt Spite just while she might be Manon's daughter, she's ultimately a pirate, and being Manon's daughter, you could have it where she doesn't really care. She's just doing her own things. Like, she is a mortal creature doing mortal things, and she's not a priest. She happens to be Manon's daughter, and she acknowledges Manon, but based on the Dreadfleet novel, I don't think she'd give a fuck.
Yeah, and also if you take a look at, for example, other demigods, for want of a better description, someone who claims to have the parentage of a god, take a look over at, say, the Children of Ulrich. Many of those are pretty much barely related to Ulrich at all. They're little more than wolf shapeshifter types who go on rampages and have almost nothing to do with Ulrich in the slightest. So there's nothing wrong with saying that a child of Manan is in fact more closely aligned to Stromfells, particularly because of the piratical nature. And pirates often revere Stromfells. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
I think it would just make for some fun aspects. The idea that there would be times where, like, Manon little hotspots within Sartosa would allow for some really fun dynamics across the little islands. Of the idea that there's like some people just acknowledge whichever one of them they think is relevant to what's going on at the time, which is how the Warhammer world generally works. So like, if it's not a bad storm, but there's other ocean shenanigans going on, you give thanks to Manon because there's no reason to piss them off if you don't have to. Whereas, if there's like bad storms or whatever, you turn to Stromfells instead. The idea that if you're dealing,
the sensible pirate takes all on board.
Yeah, and there's also just fun ideas of like imagining if you're out in like or you're like in Beishai or some city in Cathay, and there's a group of pirates who acknowledge Stromfells, and there's also a group of people that are Manon worshippers with a priest from the Empire, and they get into a bar brawl that like throws the tavern into chaos and gets out in the street, that the Cathayans get all pissed off. like that's just it's fun. It's just gang wars at that point.
Yeah, sure.
And that would probably be the simplest and most fun Warhammer way to deal with it. They can coexist, but they would also probably fight all the time. Cameo, how do demons perceive time/reality? Could you talk to Kairos Fateweaver in Warhammer Fantasy about Age of Sigmar or 40k, and would he understand you, for example? Whoo!
Okay, Cameo, it's really easy to answer this, and the answer is it goes at the speed of plot. And it's as simple as that. When writers tackle this, they go as far as they want to for the story at hand. So can they do almost anything when it comes to understanding the perception of time? Kinda, yeah, maybe. But what you also have to remember is that the material realm is an alien realm to them. To them, it's weird and fixed and constructed in the most uncanny, odd way where they're stuck in a flow of time that they can't escape. Then they're stuck. They can't just be on the other side of the world and perceive it anymore because they're now stuck in a material body in one part of the world and can't be anywhere else at the same time unless someone should summon them from a different part of their timeline. And when they go off into the aether, that is not an issue. They are etheric entities where time and space don't mean the same thing, but they still have a form of meaning over there. It's not, there is no time and space over there. There sort of is, but it's different. And the material realm, to them, is the big strange one. Now, when you speak to a demon, it's very possible it doesn't understand you anyway. You could sit there talking about Age of Sigmar and they think that that's their yesterday or their tomorrow or whatever. They don't even understand the concept of yesterday or tomorrow. Half of the conversations you're attempting to have here, it just simply won't understand on a fundamental level because it doesn't come from the material realm. It doesn't understand up, down, left, and right. It's almost an entity of pure instinct trapped within a material shell that it doesn't understand. It's a little bit trying to squeeze a very, 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 very big circular brick into a tiny square hole. All you get is this tiny little ribbon. And the ribbon is the demon in the material realm when the rest of it's stuck there on the other side. And this ribbon ain't that bright in comparison to the greater entity that it could be. Cut a long story short, could you talk to Kairos in the Warhammer Fantasy world about Age of Sigmar? Hey, if you knew about it yourself, you've already answered the question. Or 40k. And again, you've answered the question. Asked and answered, you can almost say. You have quite literally answered the question yourself, because if you can ask about it, then Kairos could know about it because you know about it. And he would then understand it just as much as you do.
Yeah, that would actually be that's the best answer. So something I will give you two little reading assignments as food for thought, which is that if you want in my opinion, a very well-written perspective of a demon, getting a demon's point of view according by an author's interpretation of being in the ether and then suddenly not being in the ether. If you read the Tyrion and Teclis trilogy, there is an entire segment about Nakari being out in the ether and how it perceives the ether, and then it gets summoned by Malekith into reality, and you get it does a really good job of showcasing Nakari being like squeezed into reality and how much of itself it kind of loses in order to exist because reality presses down on it and forces it to obey the laws of reality, which means so much of itself is kind of no longer there. And another
and to get from one place to the next, it has to walk.
Which is just terrible.
And not only that, it doesn't just walk forward, it is constantly moving through time at a consistent rate. What the fuck? How does that even make any sense? It's constantly confused, where it can't just exist the way it normally exists. It's constantly marching forward through time and can't go back because it's stuck in the material realm. So it's broken. Reality sucks for demons. There's a reason the Chaos Gods want to destroy it. It literally sucks.
Yeah, though the irony, of course, is that there are a lot of demons that also find it kind of weirdly addicting.
Yeah, totally. Because
they enjoy it.
They're it's particularly Slanesh demons because they are experiencing something in an entirely new way. And they want to experience more. It's one of the core components of the starter story that we were building with Gideon from The Enemy Within. But that story never really got paid off.
Yep. But another character to also consider the perspective of is Morgur. Morgur is quite literally a etheric god forcing himself as much as he can into reality, but he's big and weird enough that he's able to exist in both, and he's fucking batshit crazy. And he genuinely struggles to comprehend anything around him. He's such a good showcase of that. Like demons, when they get into the physical world, some of them are absolutely completely bonkers, but others are able to kind of like be seemingly like grounded enough to understand what's going on and like deal with things. Like Kairos, you know, is implied to be the kind that a demon that if you ran into him, you're going to have a bad time, but you could probably have a discussion with him where he tortures you and makes your head explode. But Morgur is like the truest example of how those two realities do not play ball. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Bluntly, yes, all of that.
Yeah. Leon, dear Leon, as a Lizardman fan, I always wondered, what if Lord Croak managed to survive until the end times? How different would the timeline be? Would it even happen, or could he stop it? Might be an awesome what if. Lord Croak surviving. Huge. Yeah, it would be big. Lord Croak surviving the Cataclysm would be a very fun what if. Because basically what you would be saying is, what if there was someone who knew the Great Plan and knew the Old Ones very intimately and was still around to talk to people and guide what was going on? So the answer would be, well, that would be kind of a big fucking deal. So
basically, yes.
Yeah.
It'd be huge. I think that's a good what if, Leon.
Yeah. As to what specifically would happen, maybe we'll do
that one. It's a fun one. Yeah.
Shadow of Nox 948. Do you think Norse dwarfs would put runes on wood, perhaps weaker alternate abilities? Do you think Slayers would retain possession/armor? So I will very bluntly say they do put it on wood. The Wolfrup book, the 4th ed book, that's like, oh, it has to be stone or metal. Bullshit. No, it doesn't. You could put runes into wood. Now, there might be certain runes that won't work on wood, but there also might be certain runes that wouldn't work on stone and metal that will work on wood.
I mean, some runes are noted for working only on certain types of cloth that have been woven in particular ways as well. There's lots of different material that can take runes. Certain runes are designed for certain types of material, and would the Norse dwarves have ones that are specifically designed for wood? Yeah, I mean, they use wood in almost all of their construction in a fashion that the dwarves from the rest of the, let's say, dwarven kingdoms don't. So would they have surviving technology effectively? And I think the answer to that is yes, and possibly because they do and practice a host of, let's say, ancestor worship that the rest of the dwarves don't. For example, Hashut. And who knows what Hashut may have initially have put down with all of his runes that have now been abandoned by the rest of the dwarves.
Yeah, and then would their Slayers, so they would not Slayers necessarily, would their Berserkers?
Their Berserkers would, but their Slayers probably wouldn't.
Yeah, because they would have Slayers. They would just, they might be a little different, but they would, I still think they would do the whole thing of like emulating Grimnir when he left for his path, which he was not wearing armor when he left. So that
I think trying to imagine the Slayers as something different is not really worthwhile. I think it would be better to say the Slayers are effectively exactly the same. It's just they're accepted with the Norse dwarves, and they're not accepted elsewhere. I wouldn't try to make them something different, but when it comes to the Berserkers, they absolutely are different.
Yeah, and I think Berserkers could wear armor. Yeah.
Totally.
Let's see. Chaotic Monkey. Both Vashtor and Hashut are related to the Forge of Souls, but there's no conflict mentioned. This leads me to the conclusion that they are in fact best buddies, and not that Games Workshop just didn't want to address it. So,
or they're the same entity.
Yeah. So this would have several answers. You are correct. The GW has just chosen not to touch it, which I will say I find particularly hilarious, considering that so they released a couple of White Dwarfs very recently, like in the last 3 months, where they basically released an article where they did.
I just want to bring this up, just to make sure that we have said it again. As it currently stands, the Lorebeards channel can't accept super chats at all because it doesn't have monetization switched on. If you want to do super chats, you need to go over to the LAWhammer channel. We're going to have the super chat switched on the Lorebeards channel as soon as Google's AdSense accounts aren't stupid. But we're really close to it.
They're very stupid, by the way. If you've ever wanted to see me and Andy going like, oh, just like constantly, thank Google for that. Anyway, so Games Workshop put out a couple of white dwarfs recently where they reiterated, and I will scream this to the moon that people misinterpret what this means, but they basically say chaos exists in every Warhammer setting, and the dark gods, that the popular dark gods that you see like Khorne, Nurgle, Slanesh, and Tzeentch also exist in all of the settings, and they are fundamentally the same god. And now I think people like to grossly conflate what that means, where they say, oh, so they're the exact same and they have the exact same thoughts and the exact same personalities and the exact same experiences, and there's no differences whatsoever, which is not what GW is saying. They're not saying that they don't have any differences, because they are expressly different. In Age of Sigmar, Slanesh is imprisoned, whereas in 40k and fantasy, it is not. That is a difference. Which is caused by circumstances around it inflicted by that setting onto it, which means that it is different. Which there are some people that will look at you in the face and say, no, they're the exact same because GW said they're the same. So then, and it's like, no, you're got reading comprehension. Anyway, so when it comes to Hashit and Vashtor, GW's article did a very cheeky thing where they were like, oh yeah, these gods all exist in the same universe. And then if you flip a page, it'd be like, but the Great Horned Rat is only in Fantasy AOS, and Hashit is rising and Vashtor is rising, and don't think about it. Don't think about it. And it's because GW doesn't want to do the work. So there is no easy answer to this, because GW is not going to give you one. I'm just going to tell you that. They're not going to get, based on how they currently act, they are not going to give you one because they don't want to deal with it.
I mean, they have given you one, and the answer is quite simple. They're all disconnected but connected.
Yeah, which for a lot of people, which for a lot of people is not a satisfying answer.
But it is the answer, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. What I will say is it's really up to your interpretation. You could just decide that Vashtor and Hashit, like Andy said, are just the same thing, but viewed through Vashtor is viewed through a 40k lens. Yeah. And he appears in a way that the people of the 40k universe would understand him. And Hashit is the exact same thing, but in Fantasy AOS. That works. You could also say that oh my God, they were roommates. That works.
Yeah, sure.
And you could also say that, nope, the universes are actually fundamentally separate in a different way, and this is simply an expression of the god of the Forge of Souls. That works. Like it's whatever. It's just whatever you want it to be, frankly. Stephen Lucas. Meant dystopia.
Dystopian chimps. Khorne doesn't respect you, Vid.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
No, neither do I. I've not watched the Stephen Lucas, so apologies for not quite grabbing your reference there. The 40k side cultists removed honor. Even Vid gets wrong about the World Eaters, so they don't like berserkering. Just feel nothing compared to the Nails plan.
The head nails.
Yeah,
brain nails.
The head nails. Yeah, totally. So sure, I've not watched that, so I have no idea.
Yep. I am unfortunately not able to comment heavily on that. I'm sad to say, though, because I don't really see a question in there, just sort of like cool. Cool.
So thanks, Stephen.
Yeah. Arc Tisher Frosh. I really enjoyed your dragon stream, and I was wondering how possible would a Wah dragon be, and what would it be like? That's a very cute and insane question. It's an insane question, to put it very bluntly.
So no is probably the answer. It's one of those ones that you look at it and you go, the core component that's required is missing. And the core component here is eternal bathing in the energies of. Yeah. And the long bathing in Wa energy is just not a thing that you really have much of a chance, because when Wa energy builds up, it goes somewhere. And it takes all of that energy with it, and it's gone, which means the dragon would never really bathe in it. Now, could you do this? I mean, you arguably could.
So what I was going to say is, if you had smoked some crack, and you were like, I'm making a Wa dragon, fuck everyone, I'm going to do it. Now, could you do a what I would deeply, deeply express is a batshit insane scenario where like some dragon lays its eggs in a subterranean cave and some greenskin spores somehow get on the egg and like infect it, and you have basically a mushroomified cordyceps dragon that is then tapped into Wa energy.
Sure.
Sure, mushroom dragon.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Who doesn't want to have their own mycelium network dragon? Just perfect. Go for it.
Yeah.
Squid dragon it is.
Yeah, you could just make a squid dragon. And that actually wouldn't be that bonkers. Like,
yeah, it wouldn't be that bonkers. The more that we're saying it, the more it's becoming a thing.
Yeah, because like in AOS, we already have flying squigs that have like wings. So you would just need to make a new, very big squig, basically.
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool.
It does. Cool. It does sound pretty cool. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've gone from dissing this idea into going, oh, you could make that work.
And it would be horrible. It would be absolutely horrible. A dragon of water, what I would imagine, just for my funsies, would be a dragon that when it roars a wah, and like the psychic energy of that wah is so cataclysmic, it literally is like it's like a supersonic boom instead of a breath attack, where it just like a green blast just goes boom and just obliterates everything in front of it, which is great. Super fun. Bifocal King had an idea to add on why the nightmare dragon guards the dragon boneyard, or why it's sacred. Maybe that's where the dragon race's origins come from.
I mean, it's not impossible.
Yeah, could very well be the case.
Yeah, totally.
Brock 6000, would you agree that the biggest detriment to the Lizardman agency is the fact that they almost never communicate or ally with other cultures? Greenland / Skaven do, and it makes them more interesting. So fun. My opinion on this, you're correct. And I think it's kind of a holdover from, especially, a great example, go back and read the 6th edition Big Red Book, which was the core rule book, which has a section on all of the armies. And the big thing you'll notice is that when you get to the Lizardman section, they're treated as the super mysterious guys over there that nobody knows about. That's why they don't have agency, because they're not relevant. 5th edition, which was different because it literally opened on Lizardmen attacking a Bretonian castle, which is awesome. And then Games Workshop kind of
not in Bretonia. Let's just be very clear about this. It's not even in Bretonia. It's in a big, massive Bretonian colony down in the south of Araby. So it's, if anything, even more complicated. Lots of different groups working in different ways. So, yeah, beforehand, I'd say that 5th edition Lizardmen were much more involved. 6th became less involved because they went, oh, shit, this stuff that we've written, it doesn't make sense with the world that we're doing. Let's write it properly. They wrote it properly and ended up taking the Lizardmen out of Warhammer in many respects. And then in later editions, they go, actually, no, there's parts of the old ones, and Slan, just spirit them anywhere. Yeah! And they can be found anywhere in the world. And suddenly they're all over the place. And my goodness, Dumbo, thank you very much. We'll get to that in a moment. But holy heck, thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. It's very generous. Thank you. So yeah, I would heavily agree that the Lizardmen's reluctance to ally with or just deal with in any way outside races was their biggest handicap. It shouldn't have been a big handicap, but it was a big handicap.
I mean, there should have been an entire bit in there that explained that the Skinks took over the role that in 40k had once been taken over by the Zotes, which was way back in original 40k lore. The Zotes were almost the forward ambassadors of the incoming swarm, converting people to their way of thinking, making new cults for the swarm that's going to come to make the takeover when it came much easier. And in some respects, the Skinks, some of the Skinks should have been fulfilling a similar job. Diplomats, going out there and spreading what they believed was the core message that had to be passed down from the old ones down through the Slan down to them, and making the world be the way that they think it should be. That involves diplomacy, not just the diplomacy of a Saurus and a particularly sharp obsidian blade. So I think there's a missing part of the Lizardmen, and it's something that should have been added, and that is that they communicate with and deal with others a lot. But that's just been removed, and I think it should be added back in.
Yep. Age of Sigmar fixed that, which is why the Seraphon actually get to do things. And I will also note that I had a thought and left my brain. Maybe it'll come back to me. Dang it.
Sure.
Well, yeah. Huntington Tart. I recently learned Sotek's true demonic name in the Marathi stream. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel like none of us mortals should. My actual name. Mortals should have access to that arcane knowledge. Also, will there be a Lorebeards Patreon? As of right now, no. But if there comes to be a point where it's like, oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah. If there's a point where it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe we do need one to like release these materials or explore this form of community building. Then yes, as of right now, we haven't thought of anything yet.
Yeah, the most likely reason to have a Lorebeards Patreon would just simply to have a core blog that explains what's coming up next. And that's free. And that could be almost anywhere anyway. That could just be our Discord. It could be almost anything. It's a handy potential tool for that. But if we were adding, say, for example, and you can give us money for, those give us money fors would almost certainly be, you can just give us money. We're not giving you anything in return beyond us doing our shows. Because there's not an obvious bunch of extra stuff that we would want to do on top of the many things that we already do. So I think as it stands, we're quite happy. I mean, thanks very much for the super chat. I mean, that does what we need to do. And that's great. And we have no strong reason to try and squeeze money out of everyone any more than we already do.
Me and Andy care a lot. Man, this is going to sound super parasocial, but I'm going to say it anyway. We care a lot about y'all and trying to like make sure that it feels like y'all are getting as good of an experience with me and Andy as you can have. And we don't want to take advantage of that relationship or be like squeeze for like every penny. If we can now, and it could be that like we started up and there's like people being like, hey, you should do this. And we're like, ooh, I don't know how that would work in a stream. And someone's like, for the love of God, just do a fucking Patreon. We might be like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
But as of right now, we haven't thought of how that would make sense. I'll just leave it at that.
So, what I would suggest, if you want to think of this one over, Honingtart, I'm almost certainly pronouncing that wrong. I would suggest have a good think, a mull. If you think there's anything that's worthwhile, bring it up when we eventually, because obviously we've got our new Lorebeards channel that's currently ticking around in the background, about to turn into a full channel. But when that does, we will then move to an entirely new set of communications with you. When we do that, bring it up then, because we'll be in a position where we're talking about the changes that we're making to Lorebeards. On that, we didn't discuss it before, but we do have a coming soon for Lorebeards as well, which everybody knows, but we're going to do it anyway. Would now be a good time to do that since we're talking about what's going to be coming next?
Sure.
Let's do that at the end of the stream. We'll do that at the end of the stream.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it at the end. On that, just to make sure that we're super clear, I have to be pretty tight at the 7 p.m. because obviously Inside the Rookery starts
we have
at
a hard
7 p.m.
cutoff.
So we have a hard cutoff today, everyone. So as we move towards the end of the stream, and we have several super chats waiting, we are going to move through them fast to make sure that everybody gets answered, because at 7 p.m. we're having a big chat over on Inside the Rookery where we discuss themes influencing the rules and the lore of your games. So the core themes making your rules change or making the lore change to match, and why that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So that's going to be over on Inside the Rookery. We will almost certainly raid our way over there. So at the end, don't worry about finding it. Hopefully you will find it automatically, unless you're on the Lorebeards channel, because I've not set it up over there.
We will, and I will have it set up on everything, so it'll be good to go. I'm doing it right now.
You're the best.
Antonio Ranza, please, we need an episode of crossover of Nagash or Lizardman, the universes of D&D. Jay,
holy shit,
more fantasy and May fantasy. There, I can think of a very good route that would work on. So thank you for the idea. We'll be in touch, and I'll leave it at that. we'll be in touch.
Yeah, one of the big problems with crossing over into any other setting is knowing it. And I know some bits and pieces here or there written for some, but some I just don't know at all. So this is always one of those ones where we'd need to get the right people for the job.
Yep, but I do be having ideas.
There's ideas going on there. I can see the click in the whir of cogs going on in the background.
Let's see. Stephen Lucas liked the idea. Morcar lived during the Great Catastrophe. then became Everchosen by Sigmar because of warp time. Sigmar was luckier than the cult would like to admit. That would be a fun way to massage more aspects of Morkar's story if you wanted to have him like be present for the Cataclysm, but also be the same Everchosen that shows up during Sigmar's time, because that wouldn't be unusual for the warp to do something along those lines.
Yeah, this as a storyline is not only, I think, potentially affix for what is conflicting lore, it's probably one of the better fixes, depending upon how it was spun. In that we have two versions of Morkar, and there's no reason why both of them can't exist, because the version of Morkar that goes all the way back to Inarian makes much more sense of the 13 Everchosens than the stories that we have today, where we have to squeeze 13 Everchosen invasions into just 2,500 years, which means that the coming of chaos is common, happens all the time. And people will be ready and prepared for that return of chaos every 200 years or so. They would just be ready for it. The elves and the dwarves will have gone through, several elves will have gone through like 5 or 6 of them. They'll be completely prepared for it. It wouldn't be the, holy shit, what is this once in a, not just generation, but once in a lifetime event that's occurring. The lack of time for them all to occur in with the newer story sort of makes a nonsense of the story of the Everchosens and the special nature of chaos pulling together very rarely. It makes it feel like it's a commonplace event that starts with Morkar, and that's a bit bullshit if you ask me.
Yeah, and that could lead to some very fun, unique... Man, that would actually fix a lot of problems with Morkar.
I'm just going to say, it's what LAWhammer does, but I'm not telling you the story of that.
What? A LAWhammer spoiler? Sir, you have fallen.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many people on stream, and I know none of my players will be watching, but yeah, it's what LAWhammer does. Our Morkar's got an entire story in the LAWhammer version. I won't tell you what that one was if you haven't watched it yet, but his dad is not the dad most people expect.
I don't know this man anymore. He is willingly just spewed out a LAWhammer spoiler. It's clearly an imposter. Bronx 1000. Seems after the Morothy 2 stream, your opinion on her in the end time story softened a bit. Any more thoughts on that? Will you admit Manfred's was good? So here's the thing.
Brock. You sweet summer child.
So there is a very notable difference between how do you feel about the end times as it was written versus if you were talking about a character and everything that's happened to them, can you make it work? Those are two completely different things. I hate the Morathi story that was written for the end times still. But I can make it work as something really, really fucking cool with gentle edits. But if I have to do a 10,000 gentle edits, that's more like a lot of massive amounts of editing. And I would need to do that to not hate a lot of those stories.
Yeah, I think, Brock, our opinion can be summed up quite neatly. The end times are bullshit. They're bullshit both in terms of the execution and the need for them to exist in the first place. But the end times absolutely have happened and are absolutely canon. Our job is not to look at it and say, let's stop it. Our job is to look at it and say, how can we make this shit as cool as possible? And Morathi, part of the discussion there was looking at the story that had been presented and saying, given this is all true, what can we say about Morathi and her story? And what can we say that makes sense of it all? And it may have looked like our opinions had softened throughout the course of that stream. Our opinions stayed the same. But what didn't stay the same was the potential nature of what that story could be, because we talked out different versions of it that still stuck to the core of what the end times said, but added additional detail that made it feel real and made it feel like Morathi. And suddenly you start going, oh, this is cool. This is cool. I've said it before multiple times. I'm going to say it again as clearly as I can. I think the end times as a concept is great. I think the Warhammer world blowing up is cool as fuck because it's something that most settings don't do, which is blow themselves up and actually make an end. It's a story that has an end, and that's cool. I, however, think the way they did it was absolute bullshit.
Yep.
I'm not dissing the writers. They were in a hard place.
Yeah. And no, Manfred's was terrible. Manfred got so brutally mishandled that it was just sad.
Yeah. Lots of character assassination in the end times.
Yep. Stephen Lucas, story, Morcar abandoned by the gods to be pro-Norsey after seeing mortals die as a cannon fodder against an elf god. That's the true reason Sigmar won. So, okay, if you were going to build a story connecting all the different threads, there's a lot of things you would need to play around with, because you would have, the reason I would actually really like this is, me and Andy, we've talked about on LOREBEARDS how Morcar was in the original Cataclysm story. When I went back and read it, I almost like threw up. I was laughing so hard at how stupid Morcar is in that story. Like, it is so lame.
Morcar!
Like, yeah, he literally just walks up and is like, woohoo, I'm Morcar, and Anarian immediately kills him. And it's like, wow, he's literally pointless. I don't understand why he's even in this story.
It's because he should have had a nice build-up to show how he's basically being Worf from Star Trek, to show how powerful Anarian had become. They kill Morcar, but they hadn't really given Morcar enough of a build-up for you to realize how much of a big thing that was.
Yeah. Now, if you were to massage or change the story a bit to Morcar has all this big build-up, he tries to fight Anarian, and he's brutally defeated, but then manages to retreat, and this leads to like wounded, ancient, horrible Morcar fighting Sigmar after he's kind of functionally returned to the mortal realms after being in the realm of chaos for a super long time. There is a story you could write there that would make the conflict between him and Sigmar be so much more spicy than it otherwise was, especially if you decide to go whole hog with it. And you have the whole thing where Sigmar still creates Morcar by like raiding the Norsey and it's baby Morcar, but then he goes into the realm of chaos to become an Everchosen, and he ends up going through time, and he ends up back at the Cataclysm where he fights.
There's all manner of different ways it could be told.
Yeah, there's a lot. It would make Morcar's story an actual epic, which is what it should be, because he's the first Everchosen.
Yeah, he needs to have an epic tale, and as it currently stands, his tale's bullshit and shit on all versions. But all versions could be combined to make something particularly epic.
Yeah, it would massage so many things, like even things where like there are multiple. A lot of people don't know this, but there's actually multiple versions of his suit of armor that exists, like the armor of Morcar, which is canonically worn by Archaon, but is also a generic piece of magic equipment that can be bought by certain chaos armies. Well, how the fuck does that make sense? Yeah. Huntington Cart, any thoughts on how the Garaz Gunzel dwarfs from the Middle Mountains would have been different from those of the Karazankor or the Norse dwarfs? Yes. Andy, go watch LAWhammer would be the easiest way to answer that. There is a pitiful amount about them in the Wolfrip game because they never got expanded on, to the point where if you read through it, it'll keep mentioning the Middle Mountain Dwarfs, but there's not a single clan name anywhere, which is insane to me. But how would they be very different? Andy, do you have any bullet points you'd recommend?
I do. To begin with, there were no Middle Mountain Dwarfs as we understand them today. And by that, I mean there was no holds to begin with. So if we go right back to the earlier stories of the Middle Mountain Dwarves, all that was there was trading outposts and some mines gaining access to the various materials that the Middle Mountains offered. However, as Warhammer Fantasy Battle slowly but surely expanded, and the nature of the Middle Mountains became something quite different, where to begin with, the Middle Mountains were almost like a European mountain range sitting in the middle of the Empire. Then somebody sat down and went, wait a minute, if the Warhammer world's bigger, and there's these big mountains, doesn't that mean that the mountains are also bigger? And then the Nordberg got added. Now, the Nordberg is the tallest mountain in the Middle Mountains, and the Nordberg is bigger than Everest. Just to put that into context, the World's Edge Mountains are all bigger than the Nordberg, the really big ones. The World's Edge Mountain, this just giant spine of the world that no one can cross except for a few loose passes. It's so enormous. And the Nordberg got added. And once that was added, a bunch of other stories got added too, connected to the Nordberg and the stories that they've been building in the Storm of Chaos and around that, where they started saying, oh no, there's old dwarf holds there. Not only is there old dwarf holds there, they've been abandoned. And then when I was coming along much later, trying to piece together all the various bits of lore there, we landed on, nah, fuck it, we're going to add holds there that have been abandoned for one reason or another. That was the general idea. And those holds largely didn't take part in the war against the elves. So the War of Vengeance was not a core component of what went down there. So there's one thing you could say. You could say the holds were abandoned at that time. You could say they were abandoned because of the Chaos Gate that was there. Less said about that, the better, if you don't know that story. But there's a Chaos Gate there too. And they were abandoned because of the evil that lies beneath, or whatever other stories you want to go with. But there was a bunch of holds in this area, and they have on later editions been detailed a little bit more deeply as you move into the roleplay game, where they discuss Carrick Skuga, for example. That's definitely there. Carrick Skuga is mentioned as an old hold. There's 4 or 5 holds in total that I can recall off the top of my head that are in the Middle Mountains, but the details for them in the actual printed material is almost nothing. So you can do whatever you want and you're not likely to contradict much.
Time 25. Could you guys do a make an over tyrant stream? We know practically nothing about any of them besides Greases. That would be fun. I like that.
Yeah, that could be pretty cool. Yeah, different as well, because one of the problems that we have is that whenever we do one of these things, there are certain characters, and no, I'm just going to be blunt about this. The Warhammer story, and often we're trying to tell a different part of the Warhammer story, is so often the story of the elves. And we try to pretend it's not, but it is. And that has turned into us several times in previous streams being accused of being elf lovers. It's not so much that we're elf lovers, it's we're Warhammer lovers. And the core story, particularly in the beginning when we move through 4th edition up towards 6th, all of the core beats of the story of the Warhammer's history is what happened with the elves? What happened with the elves? What happened with the elves? So it's always good to have something different to focus on. And an Overtyrant stream would be great, because that's ogres, and that'd be brilliant.
Agar89. Hey guys. Well, looking through things, I came across the Doomstones campaign. What are your opinions of it? And is it possibly worthwhile to bring it to a 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game? What I read, it was not well liked.
Hey, Agar, you're not wrong. It's not well liked by many, and that's because the tone of it doesn't feel as Warhammer as many people expect. And there's reasons for that if you go back and look into its history. I'm not going to delve deep into that because it's largely irrelevant. It's a bit more D&D in style. It was finished off by Hogshead Publishing because the last part of the campaign wasn't done by the original flame printing from Games Workshop. So Hogshead Publishing came along later and did a final part. And yeah, it goes places, building your Doomstones and Chaos Gates and all the rest that you would expect. I mean, I've played it like 3 times. It's not great. It's not bad. I mean, you can make a good campaign out of it. I mean, if you've got a good GM, you'll get a good campaign out of it, because you will. And particularly if you've got a GM who really understands the Warhammer world, because they'll look at some parts and go, that's bullshit. I'll just make up my own version and suddenly it'll be fucking cool. So I'd say there's a lot that you can dive into it. And if you get all 4 parts of the campaign, there's something fun in there. But personally, it takes work to get something good out of it. But that's kind of the case with The Enemy Within as well. The Enemy Within campaign it was supposed to be with the director's cut, this great, brilliant update, but in many respects, that sort of never occurred. And what we've got is just another version of The Enemy Within, and it's a bit of a fixer-upper too. There's lots of things that have to be done to it to try and make it feel really Warhammer and sing. So it's just another fixer-upper campaign.
Dumbo, thank you very much. Super duper generous.
Thanks, Dumbo.
You guys have shown me a whole different way of appreciating not only Warhammer, but pretty much all media. Taking maybe 2 pieces of lore that conflict and trying to find that missing middle step that makes it all fit as an example. All that to say, you rock. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Dumbo. And I will say that was this idea, this concept that Warhammer isn't broken, that Warhammer isn't fundamentally a mess, was at the core of almost all the decisions that were made at the beginning of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. At that point, there was this great idea, this great concept that Warhammer 4th edition could be the edition that pulled everything together. And the core conceit of that, one of the very first decisions that were made, was to take the Enemy Within campaign of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition and show how that turned into the Warhammer world of 8th edition Fantasy Battle, and how those 2 worlds were not alien, and they looked alien. It's a completely different empire all the way back during 1st edition Warhammer. It's a completely different political setup. Carol Franz is different. None of it makes a great deal of sense. And the design goal at that point was to show how one moved to the other. There was a meeting that I had with Graham Davis, who was the writer who was responsible for a great deal of the update. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, Graham, you're redoing the Enemy Within campaign. He was like, yes, I am. And we're going to be organizing the last 2 books that are completely different. He said, yes, we are. And I said, I would like this to be the core goal, which is to show how Warhammer has always been Warhammer. And the 1st edition is not a different world to the 8th edition Warhammer. And he went, that is music to my ears. It's exactly what I want. I've always felt that Warhammer had become all of these different plot lines, all of these different timelines, and there's no reason why they couldn't all exist. And I was like, exactly. So let's make it work. And we sat down and we plotted out the entire campaign in a way that we thought was absolutely brilliant. A bit bonkers in places, but brilliant. And absolutely explained where Fantasy Battle 8th edition came from. And at the end of it, and it was almost like 9 months to a year worth of conversations, where we were calling each other every single week to nail it down. We were like, yeah, this is absolutely fucking cool. Now, is that the version that came out? No, it isn't, because I resigned from the job and I was going to be doing almost all the writing for it. So Graham's job was to show the 1st edition and pass the 1st edition over to me, and I was going to add in all the new material that we discussed. But I was no longer in that job, so that part never happened. So the Enemy Within didn't get that update, but the idea is still there, and it's an idea that Sotek and I have continued to run with, because we believe that the Warhammer setting kicks ass.
For me, because Lorebeards got to inherit that, because that's purely an Andyism. I'll say that. That is an Andy Lawism that has wonderfully spread, and I think should be very core to everything that, I mean, not just Warhammer, but every fictional setting going forward. Because think about the amount of, I'm going to say it, the amount of time all of us nerds would waste having these pointless arguments about, no, your made-up bullshit thing written by some guy that has no idea what he's doing is wrong. My made-up bullshit thing written by a guy that I read first, therefore is the version I'm emotionally attached to, is right. Fuck you. Is so pointless. When we could have just gone, how can we make these work and also like put our own spin on the story and like use some critical thinking in a way that allows communities to celebrate the things that they love rather than fight over it. And it's like, man, I bet the Star Wars community wishes they were better about doing that. Or like, you know, it's like, and granted, it's not a natural thing to come across, because a lot of fictional settings come from a holy grail figure where there's like a singular authority that's like, this is the correct interpretation. And if you don't agree with that, then most people would say, well, you're objectively wrong. But death of the author is critical to most forms of fiction. And
thanks, Roland Barthes.
Yeah. And so I would say that I really think that this is the best way to approach almost all fictional settings, is find a way to make it work. Cause it's just fun. It's just fun.
Yeah. And what we all have to remember as fans of a setting is something that I'm a fan of, someone else is going to hate, and something that I hate, someone else is going to love. And whenever I come along as a creator and enter into this space, and I only focus on the bits that I love to the detriment of the bits that I hate, I am betraying the setting. It's my job to make it all work if I possibly can, to make it all as cool as possible. So whilst we frequently diss, for example, the end times, and we do, and for what we believe is good reason, when I say there are a lot of fans of the end times out there, I'm not exaggerating. It's the Warhammer that perhaps they first got their hands on. They read through it and they loved every last part of it.
Those poor bastards. But yes, carry on.
But they exist. And that's why it's essential when, for example, we deal with end times material, we don't go, yeah, that end times material, we're just going to ignore that because it was bullshit. Because bluntly, it was. It's absolutely incumbent upon the writers to look at it and say, all these bits that I don't like, why don't I like them? Am I being unfair? And what can I do to make them as cool as possible with all the bits that I do like? And what can I do to make the whole thing work? And I think that's something that a lot of writers don't do. And a lot of companies that own IPs also don't do, because they look at it and go, oh, that bit that we don't like, let's just ditch it. And often there's a far better story when someone comes along and goes, but what if it was actually the case? Yeah. Why would that work? And also this other thing that looks contradictory work. And then as you try to make it make sense, suddenly a far deeper, more awesome story comes out because of it.
Yeah, great example. Literally in this stream is someone going, what if both Morkars were the same guy? Immediately made me go from, oh yeah, the original version of the Cataclysm is stupid, I'm never going to think about that again, to, oh shit, no, that's genius, I need to use that now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's lots of places. I mean, we have loads of examples of characters who are dead that aren't dead, and we can do the same with Morkar. Just to give one example, Malekith. Go check our Malekith stream. Malarian, if you prefer. Malarian got killed by Teclis. He lost. And it was used as an example for the escape card from the Warhammer Magic box set to show how the escape card works. So somebody gets killed, they play the escape card and they survive. And that got wrapped into the story of Malarian, where he vanishes for a long period of time and then comes out of the realm of chaos. Nothing saying Morkar can't do the same. Nothing, for example, saying that Morkar can't be the first ever chosen and the sixth. You know, there's lots of different ways that these stories can be retold.
Yep. Okay, we got to get moving.
Yeah, we
Thank you, Dumbo, again. Ian O'Brien, love you guys and your streams. Had an idea for a Norse Dwarf / Imperial what if. What if the Norse remained loyal? They go north to find legends of lost allies and reconnect with the dwarfs rather than going into, we'll say, like chaosy exile.
I think I'd repitch parts of this. Loyalty suggests that Sigmar's the only option that's right. A different way of saying this would be, what if the Norse weren't genocided by Sigmar?
Yeah, I would. When I look at this, yeah, it's either there are two ways you could spin this, which is either what if the Norse had been
they joined with Sigmar.
Yeah, joined with Sigmar, or I could also see this being reconstrued into what if the Norse had been like fully adopted by the Norse dwarfs. So like instead of chaos really getting to them, the Norse dwarfs are able to kind of
protect them with runes around all of Norsca, for example, to hold off the winds of magic.
They more heavily interweave.
Yeah, I think there could be something in that.
The Norse one would be.
I think
really
the what if there really would be, what if the Norse dwarves realized that humans were susceptible to chaos far more so than they thought,
and tried to protect
and they would fall in short order, which kind of they didn't. So yeah, there's a story in that, Ian.
Oh yeah, there's something I could do with that. I can already think of like some things I could do with that. Super Arlock, I was rewatching Gorbad Ironclaw stream, and I have a question. When he came upon the army of knights, I would say that charging would be my choice. What do you think would have been your decision? So I'm assuming you're talking about the big battle where he gets wounded, where like the two big knight armies see each other. So, okay, here's the important thing. I am not an orc, right?
Really?
Gorbad was the orkiest orc that ever orked. But he was a good balance of Gork and Mork, so he was actually clever. What he did, based on the tools that he had available to him, was not an objectively bad strategy, because he wins that battle. He crushes that battle. He just gets wounded in the process. Because for him, he's not thinking about the idea that he is a vulnerable head of the snake, and that's all the Empire is thinking about, is that he's the vulnerable head of the snake. If I was somehow in charge of a big orc army, you would never see me. I would be the equivalent of a necromancer, where I would hide somewhere in the horde, because I know that if I die, well, A, I'm going to be dead, so that's not a good thing, and B, that the horde's going to fall apart.
You can bring yourself back.
Yeah, well, I meant more tactics-wise. But at the same time, because I'm not leading from the front, the orcs are going to hate me, and they're going to beat my ass very, very quickly. Like, I'm going to get challenged and I'm going to die. So, like, I feel like this question kind of inherently falls apart of that. I think Gorbad would have always done that because it's what Gorbad did. And if you weren't Gorbad, you wouldn't have been in the position to make that decision.
Yeah, sure.
I don't, like, strategically, yeah, he probably should have fallen back and let his army catch up with him. But the orcs would have thought that was cowardly. And he would have received a lot more challenges. And some of his cavalry forces would have left because what a coward. He ran away from a bunch of Umis.
It was an idiot choice.
Yeah. And I love greenskins. They're idiots.
Yeah, they are.
They're horrifying.
Big gore bad, god damn it. Oh, I'm not even going to go on this one. There's a story there.
Yeah. Hound of Ill Omens. I get how dragons are slaves to the elves, and it's very Warhammer. I was curious about humans riding dragons. Do they like or make a deal with the human? Not sure if it was covered in the dragon video. So we didn't actually, if memory serves, we did not talk about the one Imperial dragon. Well, actually, okay, in the dragon video, we briefly talked about the Nehekaran dragons. What I will say, the Nehekaran dragons, we do not know all the facts because they're very lightly touched on in the old world. And based on now, we know they were entombed with their king, but there is a brief mention that some of them were more like partners or allies. Some of them were enslaved. There is nothing stopping you as a human. There is nothing stopping you from, through sheer dumb luck or chance, finding a dragon egg, taking it back to your kingdom, and humans raise the dragon, and like an elephant, especially in the older days, using brutality and chains and magic to trick it into thinking that you have power over it.
It's got sentience, so it's a bit different.
It is.
No, sentience isn't quite the right. Sapience might be a better one, just to go with the Discord argument. They're all sentient, but
it can be enslaved.
It needs a bit more.
There could be humans that just became friends with a dragon. That is also very possible.
Yeah, I mean, because they have got intelligence, there is always a way to deal with them.
Yeah.
But the few examples that we have from the various editions of Warhammer generally fall back on one of the following. One, you make pals with it some way or another and convince it to join you because of personal reasons, whatever the story at hand is. There you go. There's one way that a dragon might work on side, but they tend not to have riders. They tend to be dragons that just turn up, wild dragons that join your side for one reason or another. Where there's actual riders, you tend to find that it falls back on the old Storm of Magic answer, which is high magic, and they are controlled, often by the Amber Wind, where they take control of giant creatures and bind them to their will as magic waxes powerfully.
Yeah, but God help you with the Magic Queens.
Yeah, but given that many of the older dragons are also magic users, it's just not easy. It's just not easy. But that's generally how it's done because they are intelligent, clever creatures. And unless they're young, and often young isn't what you're thinking. What you mean, like 10 years old? No, like young, like 100, a couple of 100 years old, which is why the raising it from an egg often doesn't work in practice. Because dragons are a long-lived species. It takes a long time for a dragon to reach maturity, to be actually useful. By the time that it does that, you and your cunning plan have come to an end and you're dead. And your grandson's going, well, you know, we've still got a pretty big dragon here. We're not dealing with dragons like we see in, for example, Game of Thrones, where they're within just a couple of years, enormous creatures. These are creatures that grow up over a very long period of time, unless they've got a lot of magic around, which they can grow fat on.
Yeah, because I think there's even like a goofy ass timeline thing where like someone in GW tried to give a timeline of when the Imperial Dragon was found, and it's it's insanely young. Like,
yeah, it's just daft. And plus, it's meant to be a great Imperial Dragon at that. It was originally supposed to be one of the old ones. Yeah, the whole thing doesn't make sense when you look at it. It was a poor putting together an attempt to make Karl Franz the god's gift to all humans one more time.
I'll add like 3 or 4 fun little notes of that. Imperial Dragon, as far as the rules were concerned, can only ever be written by Karl Franz, which implies that there is a relationship there, which is interesting, especially if you go with the idea that the Imperial Dragon is an Empire class dragon, meaning it's really, really, really old. Maybe there's a fun, cutesy little story there. Who knows? Make your How to Train a Dragon story about young Karl Franz stumbling into a place he's not supposed to be in the Imperial Zoo. Woohoo! Second, Chaos has actually some really good lore about Chaos Dragons and how the various Chaos Lords and Chaos Sorcerer Lords bargain with them. Some of them are dominated. Some of them they make a pact where the dragon gets something in exchange. Some of them are a god compels them. You know, there are different answers there. The third option, thing to consider that's really fun is that the Necrolith Bone Dragons of the Tomb Kings that we know little about, the fact that they are resurrected using the same magic as the Tomb Kings, and they were entombed with their Tomb King or Lich Priest. Well, Lich Priests aren't entombed, but they're bound to a particular figure, implies that they have gone through the mummification and soul preservation process of the Nahakarans, which could in and of itself be a story of that they figured out a way to manipulate dragon souls, which GW did not intend for that to be a holy shit what the fuck moment, but it is a holy shit what the fuck moment. And I'd love to see that expanded on the roleplay game for the old world at some point.
I'm just going to bring up this one from Great Book of Judges as well, Carmine Dragon. It's worth noting that Elspeth and her dragon are not strictly speaking part of Warhammer Fantasy as we understand it, Fantasy Battle that is. It was from an additional book, Tamarkin, that was added on top of the official line. In many respects, it's an unofficial addition from, well, Forge World. So it's not part of Warhammer Fantasy Battle's line, which is why when we're just talking about the strict part that comes from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, we generally don't talk about this one at all because it came from a single book that wasn't part of the official line. But the Carmine Dragon is a great example of another way of doing it. And again, probably bound by magic.
Yeah, and to be very blunt, there would almost certainly be more wizard lords riding on dragons.
Yeah. They're going to be all over the place. And I'm going to bring this back. It's canon to me. You know what? It's not just canon to me. All the Warhammer sources, as far as I'm concerned, are canon to me. But when we're discussing what Games Workshop takes as its core lore, as in what is Warhammer to Games Workshop, it's the battle game. That's it. Not the novels.
I would be amazed to see
not Forge World
ever mentioned again.
Not anything from Specialist Games, not from a Warhammer journal, or any of those things. Citadel journal, pardon me. Or any of the comics, or the computer games, or even the roleplay games. What is 100% definitely the case for Warhammer for them is the battle game as it currently stands. And as we move into a new era of a battle game, which is obviously the old world, that will become the new standard by which everything else is measured. And as we've discussed, the old world's running ramshot all over a whole bunch of bits of lore, particularly if we look at the very first book. We pretty much tore it a new one in terms of it being an example of an extension of the existing lore. It isn't, it's a rewrite. But that rewrite is going to become
a fun rewrite, at least.
Oh, a super fun one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a rewrite, though. And that rewrite becomes the new standard by which everything else is measured. And whenever someone does a new adaptation, they'll be told, look at this, because that's what it is. And all of the older stuff will be now old and no longer a core component of what is considered Warhammer.
Yeah. Meanwhile, me and Andy are rolling up our massaging sleeves.
Going, we can make this all work together.
Godric Grafted. Hello, gents. Do either of you think Alariel and Li Dao may have interacted when she performs her ritual every 10 years? Oh, at the little... So the little tower she goes to perform the big ritual that supposedly keeps... which does, but also plays a part in keeping Morslib at bay. Is more accurately on the southern coast of End, as opposed to, if memory serves, I think it's on the southern coast of End, not Koresh, which would mean that it is a long way away from Li Dao. Is it possible they've interacted? I suppose it's technically possible, but I would be really surprised if they had. Especially Alariel.
Which means it'll probably be in the next book. Because as we've noted, Games Workshop absolutely adore bringing characters together that make no sense. I mean, before, for example, the old world, would we ever have said that Miao Ying was a frequent visitor to the old world, was best pals with Sigmar, and just generally was kicking around during all the core events over in the old world? The answer would have been, no, that's ridiculous. She sits in the Great Bastion doing Great Bastion things. What the fuck would she be doing in the old world? And the answer is having a right old time. So the answer to this is no, don't be daft, and it will be in the next book.
I will say there is something. So the Dawn of the Storm Dragon, which covers these events, it does a perfectly fine job explaining why Miao Ying is there. However, the one thing it doesn't address, which is very funny to me, is why when Yuan Bo is figuring out which of his siblings needs to make a great epic journey across the ocean to go save the Empire, he very explicitly does not call upon Yin Yin the Sea Dragon.
The obvious choice.
Yeah, she gets talked about a bunch. He very deliberately does not talk to that sister and instead talks to Miao Ying and says, Miao Ying, I'll take your job for you. It's like, shouldn't you send Yin Yin? Like, the implication there that he just does not trust Yin Yin is so fucking funny to me. Like, she's still our best girl failure. She's still our best girl failure, and I love it.
Yep.
He's like, no, we're not sending Yin Yin. She'll bunk it up. We can't send Yin Yin.
I love Yin Yin. I really wish they'd do more with her.
Beerval, did ancient Nehekarans, when they were still human, worship non-Nehekaran gods like Raya and Mor, etc.?
Who's to say they're not the same gods?
Yeah, the easiest and most likely answer would be it's their interpretations of the gods. Now, which of those gods are the same gods as the ones up in the north? But
I mean, some of them have got very clear and obvious connections. Some of them, you just reach the point where you're like, surely we can't have another god of death. I mean, how many is there? What the fuck's going on here? So there's clear and obvious connections between some, but it depends entirely on what your version of the explanation for the gods is. If you're going with these are all separate pantheons doing all their own separate things, then the answer here is no, they did not worship any of those gods at all. They had their own pantheon. If instead your answer is that there are universal constant gods across Warhammer and they are all understood in different ways by different cultures and different societies, then all of them were already recognized, but probably under different names and with different myths attached to them. Probably because, according to the Nehekaran side of it, their gods were literally part of the initial war during the Cataclysm. They were there doing the thing, which
both are super valid. Like they're
and both are valid. Neither are correct because Games Workshop has said neither are correct, but they have definitely made clear intimations that sometimes they are entirely unique, discrete gods, particularly if we look at the end times. But at other points, they've made clear intimations it's the same god, just under a different name. And the reason for this complete disparity in explanation is different writers have got their own views. And they have imposed their views in whatever it is they're writing. It's their job to create something cool and new for Warhammer, and they do. But often what they create contradicts what other writers have created. So as it stands, you can go in any direction you want with this, and you are not, strictly speaking, wrong.
Warrington Crescent, I believe that the end times happening meant Warhammer ended as it began, stealing from Moorcock.
In many respects, Mornington Crescent, you're not wrong. Moorcock, unlike Games Workshop, did a fine example of the end kinds when chaos took over the world and destroyed the world that had been carved from chaos. In Moorcock's version of it all, the chaos was their initial starting point, and the rationality of people moved into it. And as they moved into the chaos, their minds solidified it all because they were rational thinking entities. When you crossed over the hill, there had to be something on the other side, and they saw it. There's a story about Earl Aubeck, or Aubeck, depending on which one you go for, where that's this directly explained. And in, for example, one of the core worlds, Elric's world, chaos literally sits at the periphery and almost like a flat earth. But if you go out to the edge, it's pure chaos. Because it has yet to have anyone go that far yet and define what it is. But in that world,
Age of Sigmar just stole more and more cock stuff.
But Age of Sigmar is hilarious to me because whenever I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there. And in that particular sphere, because in the Eternal Champion books, it's the Million Spheres, all the different spheres of reality. And yes, I know you're smiling because you're right to do so. And all the spheres of reality have the great conjunction, the conjunction of the Million Spheres, where all of them connect at one flashpoint to create the next version of reality that comes afterwards. And in one of the spheres, the one where Elric's from, they destroy the world. The Chaos Gods win, effectively. But then they don't because of the way that it ends with the Horn of Fate. And the new world is created afterwards. But yeah, it's chaos, the law, it's all stolen from elsewhere. And yeah, that's one way of interpreting the story.
Yep. Darius Rose, is it possible that Kraken Rock the Black is just the last surviving true ancestor of all dragon ogres? And like dragons, they have multiple sided lineages. Almost assuredly.
Yes.
Unless GW somehow comes out to reveal that the dragon ogres multiply by like splitting their cells and like just producing like little copies of themselves, which is almost assuredly not how they breed, then he would have at the very least needed a female counterpart, and there likely would have been many more of them, and he's just the last surviving one, is almost assuredly the case.
Yeah, it's just like in the real world, we've got this concept of mitochondrial Eve, as in everybody can trace their ancestry back to that because there was a tightening, a bottleneck in the human population in the world, probably because of a great disaster of some kind, whether it was a comet or a great supervolcano, whatever it was. It killed off most of humanity. And all humans from that point onwards had interbred with each other, meaning that there's definitely one person that everyone can draw their lineage back to, this mitochondrial Eve. And somewhat similarly, that's going to be the case here. There was a great cataclysm. We know there's a great cataclysm, but that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be some remnants of other lines, because unlike the real world, where everything mortal will only live for around about at most 100 years, we're looking at humans, they've got entities which can literally never die unless they are killed physically, meaning that there could be all manner of other individual bloodlines that somehow survived the cataclysm that have no direct connection to any of the great father of or great mother of examples that we have in Warhammer. And that would be entirely feasible and I think likely.
Yeah, and GW is overly, I'll very much say it, is very, very overly fond of father of species. That is like one of their favorite tropes. And it's a very famous fantasy trope, but it's annoying because a father of is actually much more difficult to draw lineages from than a mother of. But for whatever reason, they always like to do it that way.
Yep.
Stephen Lucas, like the reoccurring theme of many Everchosens, abandoned or being abandoned by the gods due to ideological disagreements, such as Be'lakor, Archaon, Horus, maybe even Morkar. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I mean, keeping the favorite before should be hard. It should be hard.
Impossible almost. Yeah.
Yeah. Watchdog 3079. Can Dragon Ogre's development affected by countless winds of magic like dragons can? That's a fun question. So as of the writing we have, it does not appear to be the case. And you could argue that their pact with chaos might have something to do with this.
Particularly when you look at their association with Azir.
Yeah, if you go back and watch our Dragon Ogre stream, one of the things we talked about that's super interesting about why the Dragon Ogres may have been so critical to chaos is their seemingly immunity to mutation. Which, if that's a true aspect of their being, would mean that magic would have a very hard time changing them based on them being in it. If they're just resistant to that kind of change, then it would make sense that there wouldn't be different kinds of Dragon Ogres based on the winds, because they're difficult to change.
But I would also add there that resistance to mutation is strongly associated with Haish, the white wind, which is the wind of purity, and the wind that keeps things very much what they once were, because chaos is all things. It's not just change. So they could easily be associated with one or more winds. And you could build any story you want, really. I mean, we've got Azir with the lightning. We've got Haish, perhaps, with their intellect and the fact they don't mutate. There's lots of fun stories that could be told if you wish to wrap in the winds. But equally, we can say that they predate the winds, at least as we understand them. We have versions of the story, for example, from the old world, where they say that the winds stringed out after the cataclysm, which they've sort of ignored in later books. But hey, that's something that could have happened.
Wait, that's hard. Never mind.
Because when you look at that, you realize that that story's kind of bullshit, given that there's almost certainly winds of magic before that time as well, when we look at some of the other stories.
Dragon children.
Yeah. Pardon?
Dragon children.
The dragon children, exactly, who ruined that story entirely. But cut a long story short, the answer to this is no, they're not affected. Yeah, that's it. But the answer could also be that they might be.
Another big difference is that you have to keep in mind the Dragon Ogres are sterile, and all of the Dragon Ogres that exist are all that will exist in fantasy. In Age of Sigmar, apparently they get the ability to have kids again. But in fantasy, there are no baby Dragon Ogres that can be like, because the dragons, if you go watch the stream where we talked about, a lot of it is that the egg or the baby dragon is saturating in magic and gets changed by it. The Dragon Ogres, all of them are already fully developed. There have been no new Dragon Ogres.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sticks and Stones. Following the Lizardman isolationist bit, I now want a floating temple city hovering around Cathay that's forgotten. They were originally hunting the Emperor and just trade while slapping Chaos Sea threats. Sure.
In fact, Sticks and Stones, I think you've hit upon something that the setting often forgets. And that's that the Lizardman Empire was worldwide.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's like one of my biggest bugbears.
I mean, it's worldwide. During the Cataclysm, it was worldwide. worldwide, which means that we would have things like this. Not necessarily this, but there would be abandoned floating temple cities in one part of the world. Or another part of the world would be a crashed remnant of something that come down during the cataclysm. But they forget that. They don't have the obvious story where somebody approaches a mountain, delving down inside it in the hope of getting a magical artifact, finding out that the mountain, in fact, is a crashed temple city from the cataclysm. Because that's the sort of things you would find not just in Lustria or the Southlands. You would find that in the old world. You'd find that over in Cathay. You would find the remnants of the old ones everywhere. Everywhere. But they just don't. Because no one's got round to writing that part. Because there's this fear of the old ones that writers have, that they're kind of twee. And do I really want to pull upon this thread? Because it's a bit weird. Occasionally a writer like Bill King comes along and does the techless thing and goes, fuck it, we're going to go through past of the old ones. We're going to do all sort of crazy stuff. And that's good as far as I'm concerned. The crazier aspects of Warhammer that occasionally pop out and go Trek and Felix are a good thing, I think. But most writers avoid this stuff like the plague because they get stuck in the grounded version of reality that the old world offers. So they go with this sort of more grounded Warhammer that forgets that it is a proper post-apocalyptic sci-fi setting.
Yeah, it's like, especially when you keep in mind that the old ones were supposed to have built some kind of what would have looked like Lizardman architecture on every single nexus point in the geomantic web.
Yeah, all of them. Which means that there's loads of them. Yeah. Now, a lot of them got repurposed by the elves. We know this. And they got turned into, for example, the waste stones and similar that are used to channel magic across the world to the great vortex over in Althwin, which sucks magic out of the world, ensuring that demons don't pop up everywhere. So we know that certain parts of it were reused, but reuse doesn't necessarily mean they destroyed it all and just put a little stone on top. No, it means that they took the stone on top while all the rest of it's still there, which means that you could look at the Empire maps with all of the herd stones, with all of the way stones that are marked and go, oh, this is everywhere that I should be placing some sort of old one device. Holy shit, there's loads of them.
Yeah.
Loads. Yep. Like, loads.
Terrace Rose, like dragons, wiped out all the mountain-sized ones. Oh, yeah.
Oh, like the Lizardmen. I mean, not the Lizardmen. Sorry, Dragon Ogres. Yeah.
Dragon Ogres. Go check out our Dragon Ogre stream. It was one of our favorite ones.
Yeah, it was fun.
Like we do there's a great story for why Kraken Rock is the last, and it's very well supported by evidence and why they were desperate enough to make the bargain with Chaos in the first place. Dunadan or Dunadane probably finally got to chime in live. Well, welcome. Just wanted to say thanks to both of y'all for what you do, listening to two of you make this dark time much brighter. When Larlord stream, genuinely very soon, because of this book. Yeah, if I can get it. Because of this book, we're going to be talking about Larlorn really soon. Because Larlorn, something happens in this book that is really interesting, and I don't know where GW is going with it. So I want to talk about it with Andy and y'all, and that'll be coming up real soon. Chris99, hi guys, big fan of Lorebeards expanding into its own channel. Hope to see the bigger variety of guests and topics continuing. Haha, if only you knew. Also hoping for a Skarsnik or Night Goblin culture episode very soon. That would
Skarsnik's going to happen at some fucking point.
Yeah, that would be a super fun one. Yeah,
there's a part of me that's a little surprised we haven't done Skarsnik yet.
There's an infinite amount of shit to do.
There's so much. We're sitting here 2 years later, my beard grayer going, there's so much cool shit to do.
I know. Squirrel Squatty, the Wind Wolf Goddess of the Steppes was my favorite stream. 8 pups in control of the winds, armies using wind chimes and stuff to navigate the wind safely, / everything else was so cool. My headcanon is the runt of the litter felt chaos. Popular theory, I would say.
Yeah, me too. And I thought that stream landed in a way that made me really happy that we were going to be doing more create your own style streams. Before that, I was somewhat dubious about it, whether it would be not only whether it would be worthwhile of our time, because, you know, we only have so much time. There's so many other things we could be doing, but whether I was going to enjoy it and come out at the end of it was something that I'd want to use. And as it turns out, yeah, it's fucking ace. Brilliant.
Yeah, that was the first Lorebeard create stream where it was like, oh, not only does this format work, but this is really fucking fun and really fucking cool.
Yeah, because I would not have made this.
Yeah,
I'll be as clear as I can be. This is not what I would have made. And when I went into the stream with the loose ideas of what might be coming. It was nothing like what we built. And that was brilliant because it was guided entirely by everybody who was watching, and it made it just so much more fun.
Yeah, and it has in its own way kind of built a bit of a Lorebeards alternate universe, so to speak, where like when we did the Everchosen stream, the Everchosen ties into this god, which was super fun and worked really great.
Yep.
Darius Rose,
absolutely.
orcs are said to have a bestial intelligence. Meanwhile, hyenas and wolves have complex hunting strategies. What would an average orc's acumen be then?
Far higher than most people give any expectation of. They have a bestial intelligence by description, largely because they're wanting to try and make a differentiation between the more, let's say, imaginative human way of dealing with the world and what they generally want to suggest for the orcs, which is they are far more conflict driven. And fighting and pushing towards the next conflict is often how they work. And they use the word bestial to describe that. That doesn't mean they think like beasts at all, because beasts tend to be far more, evolutionarily pushed towards what they need to do to survive in their environments. Orcs often do things that are contrary to what would help them survive in their environment because they're not bestial. They're just not bestial. They've got higher functioning intelligence. They are deeply imaginative. They'll fall to depression. They have got different versions of what they consider to be neurotypical thought and non-neurotypical thought for an orc. Some of them are not just slightly intelligent. They're as intelligent, if not more so, than most humans. Orcs really run the gamut, but most of them just like to have, to use a human expression, a good party. Yeah, and that's largely where they sit.
I would phrase it as, it's not that they're stupid, it's that the vast majority of them purely live in the now.
Yeah.
They don't think about consequences. They don't think about the future. They're just in the moment, which if you're someone trying to like ascribe a form of intelligence to them, makes them look like idiots because they're not worried or thinking about the consequences. So they'll do something that gets them blown up or killed. And you go, well, clearly they're a moron. And it's not that. It's just that they have a very species-wide ADHD.
I like that one, Blue Oyster Cultist, because you're not so far wrong. Species-wise case of ADHD, indeed, and a non-neurotypical one. We've discussed orcs who are different to other orcs. The orcs who are deeply contemplative, orcs who are great strategists, orcs who are kings. We've discussed those in our previous streams. There are examples of non-typical orcs, and we could say that ADHD is neurotypical for an orc. They are living in the moment with what's sitting directly in front of them, and they're also hyper-aggressive. So not a good combo of traits. Whereas their non-neurotypical ones are the ones that excel in areas that we consider to be relatively normal. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to view them, but I definitely wouldn't take the word bestial and really run with that too far. I would suggest that bestial is nothing more than a quick code for creatures being what we would consider to be more brutal.
Yeah. Krimgelto, Saring Doom.
Hey, Krimgelto.
So everything is canon if you want it to be.
Yeah. So no, nothing is canon. I would actually argue.
That's a way better way to put it.
Yeah. Nothing is canon and everything is open to being used. And there is nothing in the Warhammer setting that Games Workshop won't rewrite if it benefits the next step in their gaming evolution. There are lots of things that they consider to be core and will never change, but trust me, I have heard that said about things that have changed multiple times over the course of the last so many decades. Nothing in Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy setting is immutable. Everything can be played with. Everything could change at a later date. So I would say nothing is canon. And what we think of as Warhammer, this great mixture of different versions of the lore, some of which we might like, some of which we might not like, all of that pulls together to create this almost shared consciousness version of Warhammer that in everybody's head is completely different. Nobody thinks of Warhammer as the same thing. What I think of Warhammer in my head is almost certainly different to some of the things that you think are important for Warhammer. It's all made up.
Mm-hmm. Shadow of Nox 948. Do you think Norse dwarves use animals more than the South?
I do. As simple as that. And not just simply because their holds are also on the surface. So they are already out in the open in a way that most other dwarfs aren't. Dwarves are often depicted having maybe mules to go down their mines because that works, right? But very rarely are they given much more in the way of deep use of animals. But because they've got parts of their holds that are on top, they're almost certainly going to have herds that they're using on top. Unlike, say, for example, the Norse tribes, they're going to be less affected by chaos and the coming of the winds of magic because they've got their great runic stones that protect all around their holds. So they've got a way of not just being more associated with animals, but also protecting them too.
Yeah, I would say that based on the environment of Norska, things like fur and meat are going to be incredibly valuable.
Protein, man. Protein. Got to remember as well, though, that they're also hunting in a way that other dwarfs aren't. They're out on the waters hunting down whales and similar large sea creatures. It's a core component of their life is the sea, the great frozen sea that they ply their great ships across.
Yeah,
is a part of their lifestyle. They're constantly fishing, which means that, loosely speaking, the answer to this is yes.
Yeah. Now, what I will say is I don't think there would be cavalry. I don't think you would ever.
No.
No. God, please,
it's just not dwarfy.
Now, what I will say, this is a controversial opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that the Monsters Arcanum did introduce the concept that there was ancient runic lore to bind certain creatures with runic collars, which would allow them to be controlled, which was designed for the shard dragons.
Shard dragon.
You could argue that the Norscan dwarfs still know how to do this, and they maybe have bound mammoths or some other large beastie that's native to Norska, and you could have fun with that. Just don't
totally.
put it
I think that's a good fit.
As long as the dwarf's not writing it, it's fine.
Yep, I don't disagree. I hard agree to that. I think it's well worth it. And just to say, just one comment there from Magnus the Mad. I should have said donkeys actually, but mules are more common. Well, let's just get rid of that. There we go.
Yeah, you think GW worries about the semantics of which horse people should have? Please. Skylar Martin. Sup, Lord Beers? Last night I was playing D&D and was wondering if Warhammer had a sword of life stealing, how would that work technically? We already have that. We actually have so many of those. The most famous is Blood Drinker.
Again, Michael Moorcock. Okay, Mornblade and Stormbringer, okay, which literally is the sword that keeps Elric alive because Elric is an emaciated albino who can barely move. He takes this sword and he takes the soul of someone else and gets sucked into the sword and passes life on to him. Trust me when I say every early writer of Games Workshop read that, went fucking yes, and turned it into versions of vampire swords, an equivalent which suck the life out of one thing and give it to the wielder. We don't need to say how would it work. It just would. There's loads of them.
Yeah, the most famous is Blood Drinker, which is Vlad von Karstein's sword, which is so silly. The fact that he's like, well, it would take me 5 seconds to drink somebody's blood, so I'm just going to stab this guy and vacuum it up with my sword. But yeah. Dumbo, if Moore hates undead and necromancers for stealing souls, shouldn't Morians be as proficient in killing demons as they are at killing undead?
Why? Dumbo, that's my question. Why? Demons are not souls in that regard. Demons are demons. They are inhabitants of the aether. Souls are something different. And the souls that have been taken to Mor's realm or through to any of the afterlives, if you wish, are again not demons. Demons are attached to particularly the Chaos Gods. It's why they're demons and not just spirits. They are an entirely different type of entity. You're as well to say, and I'll change this so that you can understand why the analogy doesn't quite work. If Mor hates orcs and shamans for killing things, shouldn't Morians be as proficient at killing dragons as they are at killing undead, for example? There's just different things. And you need to use different words for them, and they already have existing different worlds. Now, does that mean that all Morian prayers wouldn't have an effect on all demons? No, there's going to be some crossover. There's always some crossover in the way that a fireball is going to work just as well on, for example, a human as it does an orc, because it burns them. So a whole host of Morian prayers that are designed to burn spirits, for example, would probably work in demons too. But broadly speaking, they are two different things, two different categories that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I hard agree with Andy. There would be incidental, like prayers and blessings and blessed items that would happen to work as well against a demon because the weapon or whatever is designed to work against etheric entities. So like if it works really, really good against like say a Cairn Wraith or a Hex Wraith, odds are it has a pretty good chance of also hurting a demon, depending on the demon in question. Because some demons are like once they're in reality, they're physical, like they're physical beings that are being kept there by an etheric process. And it's up to you to determine whether that prayer blessing might interrupt that process and therefore cause them harm, or whether they're too physical, therefore it won't work on them, where it would work on a ghost. It's just an example.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, but broadly speaking, it's not just they're different things. It's also, are they stealing souls? Is that just a belief? We've discussed this in previous streams about what necromancy actually is and what it does, particularly when you take a look into what, for example, Manfred von Karstein states when you move into, say, the Liber Necris, and what the different types of undead are. Many of them are not dealing with souls as we understand it at all. They're just the physical corpus part of it. So it's complicated in general.
Yeah, and ultimately, demons, I would not consider demons to be soul thieves. They eat souls. That's true. But that would be like saying, can a Morian's prayer work on that wolf over there? Because that wolf ate somebody once. So therefore it ate their corpus, which is a part of the soul. So my anti-soul stuff should be able to work on that wolf.
Yeah, it's just different stuff.
No, I think that's taking it a step out of the boundary that you're working with.
Yeah. There'll be some crossover. It's not an easy black and white situation, I would suggest.
Yeah. Skylar Martin, how would the Warhammer world react to someone who worshipped every non-chaos/destruction god to some extent? Like an elf/human/dwarf praying to Tall, Mathlan, Grimnir, the lady, except when appropriate. Meet the halflings. They're not praying, but acknowledging. Okay, I'm going to put it this way. If you had a character who was a gimmick, because this would be kind of gimmicky, who simply, whenever they hear of a god, they're like, holy shit, I'm going to do everything I can to like appease this god. And they're like, not in a form of like getting the god to kind of ignore me, because everybody does that. Like if you're a reasonable person in the Warhammer world, like a regular human being, and you're on a journey and you walk into a forest and there's somebody there that says, hey, there's a god of that forest. And when you pass through his forest, you're supposed to do X. If you're not stupid, you're going to do X because it might not be real, but better safe than sorry, right? Why risk it? Someone that's like an active, like trying to be a priest of every god they've ever heard of would be an insane person because there's impossible. So many contradictions.
Yeah, I think, Skylar, your problem here in appreciating the Warhammer world, specifically when it comes to gods, is epitomized with a single word you deployed here, and that's worshipped. Because worship is not, strictly speaking, a proper Warhammer thing, in that most people don't bow down and worship one of the gods. What they do is they emulate them, or they try to gain their favor. You got to remember that these gods, most of them, don't demand worship. They don't demand that you go down on all fours and pray away or do any equivalent. What you're doing is you're attempting to draw the god to you. It's the opposite. The god doesn't care, and you're doing whatever it takes to try and bring them. You make offerings. They've got certain sacrifices they might like. It might be coin. It might be beer. It might be the blood of a lamb. Who knows what it is that might draw the attention, but you do that in the hope that the god will bless you with some benefit. You're ultimately looking for a benefit, and that benefit might simply be, ignore me more, because I don't want to die. My relatives have all died, and I'm going to make you an offering so that you don't kill me too. It might be an offering to Shalia to say, please, all my family have died. Grant me mercy so that I don't die as well. Or alternatively, it might be to one of the Chaos Gods because you've gone mental. There's lots of things you can do, but worship is super rare because it's a polytheistic world where all those gods are real, and all those gods don't care about 99% of your life. But that 1% is the point where you turn to that god and say, help. And then as you go on to the next step, that god's no longer any use to you because you've moved from the fields and you've now gone home and you need a god of the hearth. So you're now at home and you praise the god of the hearth. Oh, your friend's got ill. Okay, I now praise to Shalia. Oh, someone's attacking us. I'll praise to Sigmar because we're all going to try and defend against those who are coming from the outside. It isn't worship the gods. It's appease the gods, gain their favor. It's a polytheistic society where all of the gods are, to very loosely put it, worshipped by everyone.
Yeah. Now, if I take those last two words of when appropriate to like their natural conclusion, the idea that a person...
They all do that.
Everybody does that. Like, if you read Gotrek and Felix, there are a lot of really funny lines where Felix, when he's in a bad situation, will literally start praying to every god he can think of. That is not a chaos god. Where he's Grimnir, Grimnir, Tall, Riot, like he's just like rambling down the list of somebody help me. That's just the average person. I would say that's not an exceptional person. That's just a normal
And certain
person.
gods are of prevalent interest to certain people. If you are a scribe, Scripsisti, the god of scribes, is someone that you're probably going to have a shrine for in your house to try and make sure that he blesses your work. If you are someone that's dealing with anything involving wisdom or judgment or justice, you're going to have a shrine to Verena in your house, your office, or wherever. If you are a soldier, you'll have a shrine to Ulrich, and maybe Sigmar, maybe Myrmidia as well. You don't worship them. You're not sitting down there praying before them going, give me all these things. Okay, because that's not really how the Warhammer world works. Instead, you are trying to attract their favor. You're also trying to make sure you don't attract their disfavor. So you give them offerings so that they don't make your sword blunt, so that they don't turn their back on you when you need courage. For example, if you're a soldier, you want to have, the courage of Ulrich, then you don't turn your back on Ulrich because you want to attract his good favor, not his disfavor.
Yeah, I will note that it is not unusual at all to be reading like Black Libraries books and stuff, and you will come across an author who will have literal worshiping as like just something that's happening in the world of like people like literally bowing and praying before like a statue, and that seems to be their full-time job. That shouldn't really be the case, but it can
Sigmarites do that.
Yeah.
Individuals for certain gods do that because it's what they believe their god wants, and certain cults demand that. Sigmarites, Sigmarites are a slightly different way than looking at all of the gods as a whole. But Sigmarites definitely have this core component of worship. But that's because so many writers have conflated it with the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. That's been some... To say that there has been bleed from that is a hilarious understatement.
Yeah.
Blues Oyster Cultist. How would a Dragon Ogre react to seeing the body they inhabit while they're in the dream world from the outside? It would be hilarious if Kraken Rock found out he's a loyalist Marine or a dark... Okay, this is a very funny, goofy question that actually could have like an element of interest to it, which is that, so for those that don't know, go watch our Dragon Ogre stream. Dragon Ogres are they're not the only species that do this or the only culture, but some of them sleep for so long and their dreams are so vivid that they believe that the dream world that they see when they're asleep is reality, and that when they're awake in the Warhammer world, that is in fact the dream. So this is basically asking what would happen if one of them was in their dream world and they encountered themselves, like somehow gained knowledge of that. And there's a lot of fun you could have with this. I mean, if you wanted to play it real crazy, you could go as far as having, that would actually be a really cool idea for a Wolfrup character, being someone that is just a Dragon Ogre when they're asleep and not knowing that. And like, oh man,
certainly be a really amusing 40k character.
Yeah, like that would be like a hilarious character in some settings. Like whether and how fucky you want to get with it is up to you. But what would they do if they found out? I imagine there'd be a bit of an existential crisis, probably. Like, yeah, especially if you're like like let's say you're a Chaos Space Marine, or maybe just a regular Space Marine or whatever. And you come to the conclusion that you're not real, you're just the dream of this horrible reptilian chaos worshipping entity, and chaos exists in both settings, that would probably fuck your brain really bad.
It's an entirely, I mean, if you want a really crazy story, it's an entirely feasible deal to make with chaos, that you will empower entities in different realms when you sleep. So when you're sleeping, you're literally inhabiting Chaos Space Marines or Chaos Cultists or whatever from 40k, or in other realms that Chaos are attempting to destroy, so that you can effectively survive through on the other side. There's lots of crazy stories you can build.
That sounds like a capitalist nightmare of having to work even when you're asleep.
Yeah, it really does.
Skylar Martin, have y'all played/read the Old World TTRPG yet? Thoughts on it? Also, shame the primary setting isn't in Cathay or Kislev. Vanilla is yummy but overused. God fuck is it? Okay, controversial take. I'm gonna say it. I was really disappointed that they basically just slapped in the Empire right at the start. Like, okay, why? Like, other than the fact that it's a different dice system at the moment, based on the material that's available, I don't really see the point in playing it over Wolfram 4th edition, which has way more material for you to have fun and play with. Whereas
the timeline, I mean, if you want to play that, then
it's like,
but you can do that with 4th edition. Yeah, point
you
taken.
Can just do that with regular.
Yeah.
Like if they had started it in Cathay, that would have been exciting. Like that would have been like, holy shit, this is really cool. But GW is scared of moving away from the Empire as the main character. They shouldn't be, but they are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It would have been nice if they started in, say, Estalia.
Yeah, or Kislev, or anything. Just start somewhere new.
Yeah.
That being said, I haven't read or played it yet. I'm aware of a good amount of it because of cultural osmosis of where I hang out. I intend to very, very soon. It's on my to-do list of things I got to read. I don't know if Andy has anything else. It's cool that it's a different dice system. That's fun at least. So it's like a different play experience. And if you want to steal it and add it using the other Wolfram system, you can very easily. So, cool. And Vera works on it, and I love Vera. So by extension, I love it through that. Chris, on the Discord, we were talking about Morcar, and no one knew for sure when he lost. Lots of cool theories, no sureties. What do you say? Before Cormac? After? Sigmar's last great challenge is first. Okay, so I will say this is vaguely addressed. So if you read the Sigmar trilogy, Morcar does not happen by the end of the trilogy. So he is the last great challenge of Sigmar, according to most versions of the story. And the reason you know this is that if you read it in I think it's the epilogue of the second book, you get a scene with I can't remember if it's the epilogue of the first book or the second book, but there's a scene where after he's been defeated, Azazel, who's still not a demon prince yet, so I think it's at the epilogue of the second book because I think he's going by Azazel at this point. Azazel meets little kid Morcar, like 8 to 10-year-old Morcar, and basically adopts him and takes him with him to run away from Sigmar, who's raiding the Norscan coast and brutally massacring people.
Far more sensible story than the LAWhammer version.
Yeah, looking for Azazel. And that by definition has to mean that it's at the end of the story, because Morcar is implied. Oh, it's the beginning of the third book. Sorry. So it's implied that Morcar still needs to grow up and then become a threat to Sigmar later in his reign.
The timing doesn't make any sense at all, because your average ever chosen is supposed to take something like 50 to 100 years to get to where they need to go.
Yeah, which is why I'm suddenly such a huge fan of the idea that he goes to the realm of chaos and pops back in time.
Yeah, the whole thing is a little... I mean, I love Graham McNeil with a passion that I can barely describe on stream, but the Sigmar books make some pretty loose choices that don't make a great deal of sense when you compare it to the timelines required and the various other stories that are set around it. But that's okay, because he's telling a unique individual story. But if you want to use all of those books as canonical events, you are going to be dealing with a lot of contradictions to established lore that you'll find elsewhere. So I would generally say use them as inspiration for all your cool stories rather than a Bible, so to speak, of incontrovertible fact.
Yeah, but most versions that I have ever read always very distinctly put Morcar as like the finale. Like he's the last big fight. Bones, what does society look like for Tomb Kings? I have heard stories of its people mimicking their life before. Do they have skeletons running empty market stalls and toiling dead earth skeletal cattle? So the best book that ever tackled this was Gotrek and Felix and the Serpent Queen, because Felix literally gives his point of view of running around in Liberus. And it's a really good answer, which is that it depends. It depends on, and like Kalina talks about how different Tomb Kings handle the situation differently. Some of them, the way they cope with their situation, and is that they're infected by a madness where they act like they're still alive, and they make their servants
aping life. I mean,
they make their servants do the things that they would have done in life. So you would go through a market of people pretending to be like, if you were, it would look like they're pantomiming, like they're just going through the motions. Whereas some of them are keenly aware of what they are, and so their cities are utterly quiet because there's no point in having all their servants run around do nothing. So they make them just basically wait or stay in their tombs until they're needed. So the city would look like a ghost town. It just depends on the individual king and what they're up to, which is fun. Blue Oyster Cultist. Bretonia is technologically backwards because the Green Knight / Gilles keeps spending the nation's income, and Musume got to roll. God damn it, I need more 5 stars. Yeah.
God damn it! I need more SSS ranked.
Suddenly it all makes sense. So
I have a slight story on that. I can't even remember which game it was, but at the end point of COVID, so in the very first time that COVID came round, so this is before everyone really understood what it was, I got it bad. And I mean really bad. So not the end point, at the beginning of COVID, it was the end point of it for me. And I'd had it for around about 4 months, and I'd almost died. And I was in a really bad state. I was still hypoxic, happy hypoxic. And at one point I was playing some gacha game, and I spent $8.99 on some nonsense little bit of DLC. Here, I'll have a few extra draws. No, I spent $899 five times. I spent an enormous amount thinking it was $8.99, but I was off my head on a lack of oxygen and just in a bad move. And then when Lindsay found out about it, to give you an idea of what our relationship was like, she just laughed. And she was like, "You fucking idiot." I was like, "Yeah, tell me about it. I've just found out about it like 4 weeks later. Holy shit." So I deleted that app immediately. Don't play gacha games when you're very ill, is my recommendation.
Andy is literally that classic news story you see of like the dementia parent watching the TV ad being like, "Oh," they just keep ordering stuff. They're like, "Take the phone away from grandma."
So much money. It was kind of hilarious and also awful. It's really funny because a part of my brain remembers being really impressed with how much shit I got for the money I spent.
Yeah, wow, what a great value. That company was so sad they lost their biggest whale when Andy left. Jack, thank you very much for the super chat. We appreciate
it, Jack. That was awesome.
Zalok, any personal favorite story arcs in the setting? So many.
Yeah, so most. If I'm honest, Zylot, the stories that I like most are the ones that we build ourselves in our games. So when you play a game of Warhammer Battle and you've got your general who suffers a great loss or has a great victory, and you decide that the next army is going to be a bit different to accommodate what happened in the previous one, and you start telling stories. When your one Lizardman champion takes on an entire unit of slayers and somehow survives, those stories are often my favorite ones, and they are interestingly often some of the tales that then got translated into the big events of Warhammer. When at the studio a big event occurs and, I don't know, Be'lakor gets a rock in his head, or alternatively Skarsnip and Belagar have a big bash, and they require a map for that and a whole new story because of a battle they just playing Warhammer. But obviously as a role player, I've got far bigger, far deeper stories on top of that. So my first personal favorite ones are the ones we build ourselves.
Yeah, and I have the problem that I know Andy also suffers from, which is that it's probably whichever one I just read the most recently.
That's also true.
So I'm like, true. This is the best thing ever. This will never be peaked. And then the next one is somehow better, and it just keeps happening.
I just want to bring that one up. I know. And it wasn't once. 5 times, dude. 5 times.
I'm shocked your bank wasn't like, "Are y'all okay? What is happening?"
I don't know. They just let it go.
That's so funny. To Tabam, completely forgot Saturday stream was a thing. Only this week and next week. And then it's
only
gone
this week
for a
and
while.
next week. 2 bonus streams. But yes, you can catch it afterwards. Don't worry. It will still be up there.
Yeah, we'll watch later. See you tomorrow for the 1% stream. The 1%. That's funny. Carrie, how did the High Elves Empire work? Like, as an empire, we know they had / have all these colonies, but what are the colonies doing / for? What's extracted?
Resources.
Yeah, wouldn't that be like a beautifully awesome, detailed book that we don't have?
Okay, Carrie, it's not properly discussed, but we can make a few clear, obvious statements. One, they were spreading across the world so that they could bridge off of the geomantic web and reinforce the vortex and make it stronger. So they had a purpose. They had to get around the world. And there were certain points on that geomantic web that they had to control. So it was also a conquest, not just simply a move out and settle. Because there are certain areas where there were indigenous people that would not just give it up. So the High Elves took it. They are probably what remains of some of the more important colonies of elves to the state. And again, I'll make more than that. They're not High Elves. High Elves don't exist in this era. Just to make sure it's very clear. They're elves. That's it. Not High Elves, not Wood Elves, not Dark Elves. They're just elves. And the elves, their empire, was as cruel as you can imagine the Dark Elves could offer, and as structured as you can imagine the High Elves can offer. It was also as in tune with nature as you can imagine the Wood Elves would offer, because they were elves and all aspects of the elves were expressed. They are not the High Elves as we understand them today, because a lot of the character of the Dark Elves that we know is a core component of what the elves were then, and no longer is for the High Elves. So don't get your head that these Ulthwani elves at the beginning were like High Elves. They weren't. Anarian was the fucking worst at the top. He was basically a Dark Elf. Their first Phoenix King is a Dark Elf, to be very loose with the terms. And the ones that came afterwards, some are more High Elfy, some are more Dark Elfy, if you will, but that term doesn't really apply. They were conquesting around the world to take control of important resources. Now, those resources might just have been magical ones for the geomantic web, for the vortex. It could have been stuff that they needed for their shards to create their soul stuff. There could have been all manner of shit. The story's not been told. But we know they encountered many others. They decided to nope out of the lizardmen and stay away from those fuckers. But they directly traded with and worked with the dwarves rather than turning their backs on them. And apparently they traded with and eventually split the sea up with the Cathaeans as well. So there's a whole thing going on there, but don't think of them like High Elves.
Yeah, and if you're talking more about like what's left, like in the modernish era where you have like the High Elf colonies, a lot of them funny enough, a lot of them, while they do have resource extraction, they get like, you know, they're more kind of like outposts. Where they're kind of like places for the Navy to like take on new supplies. They trade, like they're part of that kind of like world police enforcement force. And they also protect trade routes for like getting those cool materials from like End all the way to Ulthuan. It helps to have a couple of spots where you can stop and like there are safe harbors if you're being pursued and yada, 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 yada.
Yeah, it's a part of that elven history that's very poorly recorded, and if you want to use it in your games, go wild, because it's not probably going to be used in any official supplement for a long, long time, if ever.
Okay, so
Peter, hilarious.
Peter,
okay, War in Heaven. Here we go. You ready? It happened. Done.
So
probably.
For anyone listening, can you go through a quick timeline of the War in Heaven, if that's even possible? It's not. That unfortunately, that is the answer, because which War in Heaven? Are you talking about the time where the gods fought chaos? Or are you talking about the time where the gods had the civil war, the elf gods, if they're even just elf gods? And also, did the elf god civil war happen before chaos showed up, or did it happen after chaos showed up?
So there is an answer, because we know that certain stories are conflated, and I know there's an answer because I kind of half wrote it in more than one place. And loosely speaking, the War in Heaven is the Cataclysm, and it ends before the Cataclysm ends, when Azurin withdraws from the world and all the gods. So that's when the War in Heaven ends. So the Cataclysm is at the start of it, And before the cataclysm comes to an end, the war in heaven has come to an end. We know that that's pretty much the case because I wrote that in.
So the only thing I'll add to that is that...
go.
Yeah, the end times fucked that up.
Yeah.
Because the end times says it has nothing to do with chaos. Because they took the 40K one and then warped it.
Yeah, 100%. So, but that's the bit I was about to move on to. After I wrote those bits, the end times occurred and they did something different. So there's more than... It's bullshit.
Insane. It is so insane.
It came from Lilith, which means it came from Ladriel, which means it's a lie.
Yes. And because it's not actually Lilith, it's just Ladriel lying and saying she's a Lilith.
Yeah, exactly.
But... oh man!
It's a mess.
I actually messaged Andy about this just a little bit ago. I'm working on a video right now where I'm talking about everything there is ever written about the elf gods in Warhammer Fantasy, and it has been a clusterfuck. To say that it has been one of the most difficult things of research I have ever had to do. It is so bad and such a mess because the amount of times, especially God bless him, especially the amount of so I'm not blaming it all on him. I just know that he did a lot of the heavy lifting for it, which is that Josh Reynolds wrote a lot of the War in Heaven stuff for the end times. And the amount of times that he references something as if it's something that's been written, but then you realize that it hasn't, and he's referencing something that doesn't exist, probably in the hopes that he would get to expand on it later, but maybe
himself.
Not, is insane. And it makes all of it completely collapse in on itself because he didn't get to finish it before he left Black Library, and he doesn't work on Warhammer at all anymore. And once again, I'm not throwing shade at him. I'm just saying that this is a thing that makes it difficult, is that he does this a lot in the end times. He talked about it on his personal blog, where he makes a lot of references to things he would have liked to have written, but never did, and it never got published. And he just did that. Because the end times was so loosely edited, he kind of got away with it.
Yeah.
And it oh my God, it's horrible. It's genuinely horrible if you're trying to make sense of it.
It's one of the least favorite parts I have for the end times, and I don't have many favorite parts. But if you go back to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, it's got a pretty clean when the gods left place, which is when Azurin returns, fights off the other gods, and the remaining Kadai and the lot are then sent away. That's it. We're done.
Yeah, it works so much better, and also it gives like the elves something to do for like a lot of the cataclysm.
Yeah.
If you're running with the idea that the lizardmen were like bearing the brunt of the invasion, which all of the lore explicitly says. So it's like, well, what the fuck were the elves doing for the first few hundred years? If they're having a god war, well, then they're kind of busy.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because the lore that we have is fragmented, broken, and the answer to your question is ha 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 ha, because there's not an answer.
Yeah, sorry. That was the simple, easy version of the answer.
Okay, given the time, we have about 5 to 7 minutes left. We have to power through that, as I said we would do earlier. We have to power through the next set. And just to make sure we've definitely said it, we're going to be moving over to Inside the Rookery afterwards, where we can discuss all manner of cool things about using theme in your rules and also your setting and pulling the whole thing together as one thing. A 1 hour chat's going to be absolutely awesome. And do make sure you turn up tomorrow for Morgiana Le Fay, where we are going to be diving deep into one of the cooler characters that Warhammer has to offer. She's definitely not an elf.
Except she is. But yeah. And these are...
So let's go. Let's get through the last couple.
Yeah. Charles the K, if the Warhammer world was so much bigger, wouldn't that make a lot of the trade routes much more complicated? Yes. This book is the first ever book I've read that actually addresses that. It actually addresses that really well. And I was like, wow, they're explaining how trade routes work. This is cool. And surprisingly, the answer is, yeah, it's really complicated and it's really difficult. And I had a lot of fun with it. Hard recommend that book. We'll be doing a stream on it soon.
I just noticed that we're almost at the end of the super chats already. That's just great. Yeah, it's almost like we planned it. We're doing brilliant.
Look at that. Hi, all. Andy, since you play Paradox map games, Have
Yes.
you ever played Embanar? Super
No,
cool
that's a mod, I
homebrew
believe.
fantasy
It is,
setting
yeah.
in EU4, and as of today in Vic
Oh, there you go.
3. Hashtag non-sponsored.
No, I haven't. And should I? Omnicide, if it's good, I'm always willing to have a quick dive in. Having said that, though, at the moment, I don't need to be starting new games. I have so much on my plate to do. I mean, after this, I'm almost certain to be diving into editing a thing that I'm not allowed to talk about because I'm actually NDA'd. But a thing that I'm doing, which I need to be doing. I think there's a perfect time to also bring up our what's coming very soon.
I think it's time. So we have an announcement that
announcements.
If you've been paying attention or you're active in the LAWhammer Discord, which not everyone is, you've probably already seen it. But I'll just let Andy take it away.
Okay, so guess what we're doing? So you might know or you might not know that I tend to draw things sometimes, and this is one of the things what I have done draw. I have taken, and I'll probably do a blog post about this at some point, I have taken the various logos of Warhammer 40k, right through first edition through to the most recent editions, piled them all together and made our own Lorebeards one because we are heading forth on our new Lorebeards channel into an entirely different setting. We are moving into 40k. We are doing Lorebeards 40k as well. As to how we'll be doing that, we will be discussing it very soon. But yes, expect on a Lorebeards channel somewhere near you very soon all manner of 40k heresy heading in your direction.
Yeah, so just like there have been, there's been a weekly Lorebeard episode for fantasy and all fantasy goodness, there will be a weekly 40k episode for all of your wonderful 40k goodness.
So if you don't know 40k and you'd like to know more, now is the time, because we're going to be diving into that in depth, and we have got some pretty damn good experts to be discussing it all with you too. And let's be clear, this is not something that Sotek and I are going to be running, but that doesn't mean that Sotek and I will not be involved, because we can't help ourselves.
Yeah, because spoilers, our knowledge of 40k is surprisingly dicks, and by which
no, actually, mine's pretty decent.
Okay, well, mine sucks. Yeah, so
mine's. I'd say my 40k knowledge is about 70% of my Warhammer knowledge. I could do a stream in it.
So
I just
we'll be
tend not to.
But we're not going to be the primary hosts. There will be some new hosts, and stay tuned.
Yeah, so this is going to be super fun. I spent a little bit too long drawing that Lorebeards 40k logo. It was super fun. But I also say it was a little bit annoying to put together because I wanted to make sure I got bits of the first edition in there, which is why the colors got that yellow to red little bit in the 40k, because it was very important that I got that in. I wanted it to feel like it's a bit like the modern logo, but I also wanted to make sure I had a proper eagle's head, because I hate the modern logo's eagle head, and I also hate the way it does the wings that don't look like proper wings anymore. So we've got proper wings in our version. That's our funky cool logo. And yeah, that's going to be used for all manner of things that you're going to see coming up on the Lorebeards channel very soon.
Yes, because yeah, Andy has an unhealthy obsession with logos, I will say, of like the second we talked about this many months ago, I think maybe like 2 hours past, he's like, what do you think of this as the first logo? It's like we literally are just spitballing this. Why?
And it's done. Yeah, and Mr. Vorn, you are correct.
The bullet holes represent Andy's frustration of putting together that logo.
You are absolutely 100% correct. It's why I did them. I was finding a part pretty frustrating, and I was like, fuck this, and I put bullet holes on it because it amused me.
Okay, I'm just going to grab some random questions I see. Old 40k or modern 40k? It's Lorebeards.
Yes.
So it's yes. The answer is yes. Lorebeards AOS win. Stay tuned. I don't know. Stay tuned. Who's it going to be? You'll find out. We're expanding Lorebeards team. Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
There are.
Yeah, we definitely are.
There are new faces. Well, faces. Some new, some maybe not so new. Coming to Lorebeards. And being actual official Lorebeards, and we hope y'all are excited for where we're taking the show.
Because I'm super excited by it. But then again, I am a child, as you all know.
Ricky Tatman, can't wait to tell you about how the Fey Enchantress killed our Chaos Lord's adopted son tomorrow. Oh dear.
I'm looking forward to it, Ricky. In fact, if that's all we discuss throughout the course of our stream tomorrow, it will be fun.
Will they have beards? Everyone has a beard, whether on the inside or the outside. Everyone has a lore beard.
There's all manner of ways I could take that. Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah. And that pretty much wraps us up for today with 2 minutes to spare.
We've done well. So thanks all for your support over the course of the last 2 years. As you may note, we are about to move in a new direction. And that new direction is not in any way less than what we did before. Our Lorebeards, our fantasy Lorebeards, is continuing on exactly as it was before. What we're doing is we're offering a broader array of material. So if you want to learn about 40k, you can. If you don't watch it. That's okay. You can watch your own thing.
If you watch it.
But if you watch it, we'll be happy. But yeah, as we expand outwards and Lorebeards does other things, in no way does that mean that the Lorebeards that we've done is changing. We don't intend to change Lorebeards Fantasy. We enjoy it too much.
Yeah. So, yeah, nothing here is going to change. We're still doing the same amount of shows and all that, so don't worry about that.
Totally.
Please stick around for the Rookery stream. We'd love to have you all join us. We're going to be raiding over there right now. Andy's typing in the raid on Twitch as I speak right now.
I've already done it.
There we go. And that should be launching. And if you're on YouTube, it'll automatically move you over, or there'll be like a little go now button. I've set those all up, regardless if you're on the Lorebeards or the LAWhammer channel. So enjoy the show, and we will see you all tomorrow.
You certainly shall. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.